test. Check 1, 2.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's time for a workshop. Again, thank you, everybody, for being here. We're going to go ahead and call today's workshop to order. This is the Flagler County Board of County Commissioners. It is Monday, February 10th, 2025. It is 1:01 p.m. If I could have everybody stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. At this time, we'll take a brief moment of silence. This is a moment for individual prayer, reflection, or meditation. We take this time to honor and remember our first responders and the men and women in our military who keep us safe and protect our freedoms at home and abroad. All right, thank you. Looks like we have full attendance today, and I want to thank everybody for being here. We've got quite the list of items to review at today's workshop. So if we could go ahead and get started, we will start off with item number 4, which is lobbying, and then go into our legislative update. So Ms. Albanese will kick us off. Good afternoon.
I'm your legislative liaison. And so today, as you can see, our lobbyists are not here. So I wanted to take a brief moment and explain that last week I did email all the commissioners as to what transpired. But at the House, the House decided to do a legislative review of all items that were vetoed in the budget last session, which includes 3 of our projects. And they contacted us on Friday. We had a discussion, and the discussion was, do we come here or do we go to Tallahassee to work on lobbying for your items? And during that discussion, we decided that because they only have, there's a 10-day window that they're going to be reviewing these items, up to 10 days. It doesn't mean that they will spend the entire 10 days, but each working group, so there's 4 working groups that have been identified, and each one of those working groups will review a different area of the budget and of those items that were vetoed and make a recommendation back to the legislature, if anything, whether to overturn or not. So in discussion, I spoke to administration as well, what was the best course of action, and we felt that it was important for them to stay in Tallahassee and work on our behalf, and that I would take their presentation, and just so you can see that they did provide me with a copy of their presentation, that they were prepared to come here today and discuss and give you an opportunity to ask them any questions you might have. We can bring them back another time, but we truly felt that this was important for them to be in Tallahassee. So that's where they are. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to kind of weave my legislative update in with theirs. I know you've got a very long agenda today, so I don't want to waste too much time. So I'm going to go through theirs as well as, like I said, give you any updates that I may have. So the first one is talking about in their lobbying information. They wanted to get across who the leadership was and what their priorities are for this session. So the leadership priorities, obviously, is Governor DeSantis, President of the Senate, which would be Ben Albritton, and the Speaker of the House, Daniel Perez. And each one of them have some priorities of their own. So looking at Ron DeSantis, Governor DeSantis wants to reduce state spending. He's looking at property insurance, which has been an issue across the state of Florida, and pay down overall outstanding tax supported by state debt. And then the Senate president, his priorities are reducing state spending as well, and I think all three of them have that as a priority. Rural renaissance, focus on agriculture and rural Florida, and providing fresh food for underserved kids. And then Speaker Perez, his priorities were reducing spending, state infrastructure, and affordability. So now looking at Governor DeSantis's budget, this was released just, I think it was at the beginning of last week. It's his 25-26 budget recommendations, and his theme is focus on fiscal responsibility. So Governor DeSantis would like to have no more than $115.6 billion budget. And his highlights include funds placed in reserve, state debt reduction, and continued tax incentives for Florida consumers. And I think what Fiorentino Group wanted to get across is this is a high-level budget, and the governor makes a recommendation to the legislature, but at the end of the day, the legislature will take that and they will craft what that looks like in their budget at the end of the session. And then, of course, at the end of the session, the budget will then be turned over to the governor, who will review it, and he has the right of line item veto. So some of his budget highlights include $50.2 billion increase in general revenue. There was a $50.2 billion increase, which makes a $383 million increase over the current fiscal year. $2.2 billion in tax relief, focusing on permanently repealing the business rent tax, creating a new venture tax credit program, and providing new and traditional tax holidays to help keep more money in the pockets of Floridians. $1.7 billion for Florida State colleges, $3.9 for Florida State universities. $1.24 billion is provided for disaster preparation, response, recovery, and mitigation, including $344 million in state match for costs relating to the disasters, $795.5 million in funding for education, capital outlay initiatives, $275 million for the expanded water quality improvement grant program. That one's important because we found out this year that the legislature had $200 million in grants, but they received applications totaling $2.2 billion, I think it was. So $200 million was not enough, and adding $75 million I doubt will be enough for all of those projects. And just so you know, the current grants are still in the hands of the governor. He has not released the grant list yet, and I think part of the reason why they're holding it is that they're waiting to see what the legislature overturns, because many of those water projects are from last session. So they're going to see if any of those get overturned before they release it, because if they get the money through the legislature, then there's no sense giving them the grant as well. So I think that's what they're waiting for. We'll see how that turns out. But we do have 4 of our own water projects for that grant. So we'll have to see what happens. We're still waiting on that. $69 million to infrastructure improvements and resource management for state parks. An additional investment of $261 million for infrastructure projects in local communities. $100 million, which is a $50 million increase over the current year in renourishment for Florida beaches, so that could be really important to Flagler County as well. and $13.8 billion for the State Transportation Work Program. So those are the highlights for Governor DeSantis's budget, and that's what the Fiorentino group wanted to get across to you about that budget. So this is a legislative timeline, and they've provided all of the dates. As you see on here, February 14th was deadline for submission of our required appropriation projects, and I update every week. I send the commissioners a legislative report, which looks like this. You've been getting it. We're on week 4 now. And in there, I review with each of you some of the bills. I go through all of the bills, but some of the bills that may be of interest to Flagler County. And I give you a high-level description of what's going on, where they are. Right now, it's mostly just filing the bills. There are some that are getting referred to committees or subcommittees, and so we're watching that. And then I let you know that the House forms, where we were on the House and Senate forms. And we did submit the House and Senate forms on January 31st to both Senator Leake's office and Representative Greco's office, respectively. And they now, their aides and assistants will now take the information that we've provided and actually put it into the state format and get the bills get a bill number and get it filed. Now, they have to have their bills done by February 28th. You'll see where it says February 28th. All House and Senate bills must be approved for filing by 5 p.m. So that's why they wanted that 2-week window. That's why it was due February 14th. I had a deadline for myself of January 31st. That way, if there were any issues, we wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time to respond to those. Now, they show March 4th as the legislative session beginning and the deadline for any other filing bills for introduction. That's just filing them. Now, what they're not showing there, and I'm just going to tell you, March 7th is the deadline for what we call the attestation forms. That's a certification form. Once we get a bill number, we'll fill out these forms attesting that the information we've provided is true and accurate. And the chair is the only one who signs that. We will submit those to Representative Greco's office, and those will get filed with our bills. So that's March 7th. It's not showing up on here, but it is March 7th. And then we go through all of that. The session, March 19th, as you know, is Legislative Day. We will all be traveling to Tallahassee for that, and we will, right now, the lobbyists will work on getting us appointments with with both Senator Leake and Representative Greco so that we can have a meeting with them as well. And we'll get a briefing from many of the state leaders as well while we're out there. And so that's for March 19th. Right now, you have an opportunity, each one of you, if you want to contact Representative Greco or Senator Leake at any time, contact them. But it is really imperative that we all work to contact them and or any of the members of those 4 working groups, because those are the people that are going to make the recommendation on all of those vetoed projects. So right now is key. We only have 10 days, and really the working groups start up tomorrow, and they actually only meet Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of this week, and I'm going to assume they have meetings next week for the same time frame, but they have up to 10 days to make that recommendation. So it's important that we do that. So session ends May 2nd. And all that means is that the budget will be complete. They forward it to the governor, and the governor will make a decision sometime between May 2nd and the end of June. And that's when we'll get the results of that budget with the line item vetoes and if any of our projects have made it to the budget. So now they wanted to give you an overview, Fiorentino Group wanted to give you an overview of government relations and what's important to them. And the first thing is messaging is important because they want to work to ensure that Flagler County what we request is aligning with the priorities and initiatives of the elected officials and state budget. The second thing is relationships. As we know, relationships are key to anything, and building and maintaining those relationships with elected officials and state leaders. And the Fiorentino Group currently has really great relationships all the way up and down throughout state leadership with the elected officials. So that will have a direct impact to the needs of Flagler County. And the last part is the strategy, working with us to determine a pathway to success for not only 25, but also going forward in all subsequent legislative sessions. So they feel that the winning strategy includes meeting with elected officials, which I believe is true. We've met with Representative Greco prior to, and we'll meet with both Representative Greco and Senator Leak during the session. And of course, the Fiorentino Group will meet with them as well as many other state leaders. Our day at the Capitol, which we just talked about, which is March 19th, and I am preparing an agenda for each of you so that you will have the times, the addresses, and the locations for all of the events that will be taking place during that time frame. And then the other thing is supporting documents. We usually bring, when we go there, a one-page rack card that will give the legislatures the brief information that they need of what we're looking for, both funding and policy priorities. And so that's really important, too, for our elected officials to review and be able to reference that in future discussions. So that one-page rack card has really been key for us in the last several years. And then, of course, tracking. Continual tracking on any bills and, of course, our funding projects. That is important as well. And they're not here to answer any questions, but I am. And I want to make sure I went over everything. I gave you a copy last week of the information from Speaker Perez on the working groups with the names of those individuals on the working groups. I also provided a copy of the legislative reports. You're on report 4 from me, and of course, you're receiving a report weekly from the Fiorentino Group as well. You receive something from Florida Association of Counties and Small County Coalition. Chris Doolin does a daily briefing, which is really a great resource. I don't know if any of you have really looked at it closely, but he does a really great job, and so I commend him because that's a lot of work putting that together on a daily basis. So that's really all I have. If you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them.
I have a question, Holly.
Sure.
You said you presented something to both Senator Leak and Representative Greco. Did you personally present that to him, or just them or their staff?
We're talking about the House and Senate forms. We submit them to their staff. And that's why I said Senator Leak's and Representative Greco's office. So we presented them, we email it to their staff as well as our lobbyists. And I asked for confirmation of receipt because I just don't trust
that it's done,
I don't
right?
know until they actually tell me it's in their hands. So I did receive confirmation from all three that they have received all our House and Senate forms.
So you have not personally been able to contact them directly and speak with them directly on those matters?
We met with Representative Greco, several of us, administration, Chair Dance, and I believe Commissioner Hansen was there as well. So we had a sit down with him several weeks ago now, just to high level to give him that information on those projects and policy requests. We have not met with Senator Leak yet. Senator Leak has had some issues with, I guess, furniture for his new location. He's in St. Augustine, so he's had some issues with that, but our lobbyists are working to get us a meeting. And as a matter of fact, the lobbyist did contact me and asked me to look at some dates when we would all be available to meet with Senator Leek and Representative Greco. And looking at the dates, I felt like March 18th was the perfect date because we kind of are there already. We usually don't get there till late in the afternoon, but if we have a meeting with them in the morning, we'll just have to leave a little bit earlier, but whoever can make that meeting. So I told them March 18th was a great date for that.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
No, did. I'm sure everybody saw it, but the Chris Doolin pointed out that the governor's looking to expand homestead exemptions to 100,000, and then I think, what is it, sovereign lawsuit, basically lawsuit liability will go up quite a bit too as well, which will hinder the county. So it's something we'll have to really think about as we make our budget.
They looked at that one last year. It didn't pass, that particular one. I think
Yeah.
it was the tort claims, and so that one didn't pass. So it was lawsuits
Yeah,
against the
sovereign
government.
immunity, I think it is.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
yeah, that didn't pass last year, but we'll keep watching it. I think that might have been one of the bills that I put on your report as well for this year.
Tort reform has been in Tallahassee for the last 25 years. Every year I go there.
Yeah.
It's always about tort reform, and it's always turned
Our
down.
personal liability, our liability as a county would go from, I think, 100,000 to, or 1 million to 303 million.
Yeah. Again, that was
Yeah.
on there last year. It did not pass last year. It was something that we were looking
But it
at.
seems like we have a whole new ball game up there. There's a lot of moving parts going on with people leaving their seats, so.
Right.
And of course,
not
we're
looking
keeping an
good.
eye on vacation rentals. but
Filling the leadership vacuum.
Nothing has
Yes,
come out
it's
yet.
really starting to.
So nothing has come out on vacation rentals yet, but we'll keep an eye on that as well.
That'll come up again as well, I'm sure.
It has
Guaranteed.
been since 2015,
That's
so
right.
I expect it will in some point. But they have a deadline for filing bills, so that
A volleyball
deadline-
every time with that, too.
Yeah.
Though both of those are volleyball items is
Yeah.
my concern.
Yes, we'll keep an eye on them, and once they do have them filed, we will, what I do is I sign up for legislative tracking, so any changes that happen to that bill immediately comes to my email.
Great, thank you.
Here, may I?
Yes.
Thank you, Holly. On the combined work groups,
Yes.
this is just a little foreign to me, so help me walk through it. We evidently have several projects or a few projects. Could you tell me what those projects are that may come up for reconsideration?
Well, they're on the veto list. I don't recall if you got the veto list. Did I send you the veto list?
Yes, it's,
And I know Chris Doolin had it in his report as well, but I don't have it here. Maybe
are we asking the specific ones for Flagler County?
Yes.
It is the Tourism Center, the Black Branch Water Project, and
It wasn't really the full project. It was design. It was designed for the stormwater, but it was the Black Branch area. It was the US 1 water. It was the wastewater and water conservation.
yeah, the water hookup at
Expansion.
Southern US 1,
So would that be
Favoretta.
the most important one?
We have grants on 2 of them out, right?
Well, we do. The Black Branch, actually, we're asking for more money in the grant, so the grant would be better, to be perfectly honest. And also, we've asked for $27 million, which would cover everything, because the costs went up in the meantime from when we did our legislative request, and even to the grant point. You were talking 6 months made a difference of that much, because our original legislative request on the US 1 project was $22 million, and by the time we went for the grant, we needed $27 million. So, and the legislature, in reviewing the vetoed items, all they're reviewing is what was in the budget. So even if, like, for instance, the Conservation Center, the ecotourism, we had requested $10 million, but only $5 million made it to the budget. So that's all they're going to review and maybe overturn. So same thing with the US 1 project. We had requested $22 million, and all they had in the budget was a little over $10 million. So that's all they're going to review. Now, of course, something's better than nothing at all, but I'm not sure on 10 million if we can, you know, do the project fully. Does that
So
answer your question?
There's the next 10 days, they have that working group, and I believe the Representative Greco is on the working group to look at the vetoed items for arts and culture. And so that would fall into the tourism department's project. The tourism center will be in that group. So if someone has a working relationship with Mr. Greco, they probably best to get with Amy and maybe reach out and see if you could persuade them to the merits of that project.
Yes. Representative Greco is on the combined work group for vetoed items under libraries, cultural and historical preservation, budget issues, which include transportation and economic development and government operations. So those are the areas that they're going to be looking at. And yes, that project would fall under that transportation and economic development portion. Our water projects are probably going to be under the natural resources, I would imagine, which is the combined work group on vetoed water program budget issues. So, and looking at that one, I don't personally know any of these representatives, but I am absolutely certain our lobbyists know all of these people and will work to help us. You know, even if we get one overturned, you know, that would be great. But sure, I'd love to see all three.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That covers both lobbying and legislative.
Correct.
Okay. Old Brick Road discussion. Here comes Mr. Moylan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean Moylan, Deputy County Attorney. And I'll just ask IT to pull up, there it is, the PowerPoint. We are looking to reintroduce an old subject here and get this back on the radar of this board. The Dixie Highway, or what we call today the Old Brick Road. The Old Brick Road, we have about 8 miles of continuous paved rural highway in our county, and 2 miles approximately also extending into St. Johns County, and it is the longest such road in the state of Florida today. You can see it starts just at the north end of Espanola, and it goes all the way up to the county line as I described. And this is an image of the very first plat of Flagler County, a zoom in, and it has the Dixie Highway on there. This is book 1, page 1 of our plat. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. It's listed in the Florida Master Site file. It is part of the Florida Heritage Crossroads, so it has a lot of distinctions, but we also want to make sure that we protect it because it is now under development pressure. Palm Coast has annexed the silviculture area going all the way up to and past the Old Brick Road, and one day in the future that area will be developed. The Old Brick Road is mentioned in our comprehensive plan in many places. And the purpose of this slide is not to go through everything, but just to show it highlights in the comp plan this corridor management plan. And I will speak a little more to that. Our comp plan is telling us to, hey, look at that plan and see what you can do to implement it. Again, more comp plan provisions. I was going to go through some of the history of this road, and there's some really neat stories, but then I saw the length of this workshop agenda, and I deleted about a dozen slides out of this presentation. But just one quick story. The Old Brick Road was one of the very first actions that the Flagler County Commission that looked at and did some things about. When we became a county in 1917, we took this portion of the road from St. Johns County, and we took some of the debt that still needed to be paid on that road, But we weren't happy with the condition of how their contractor left it or didn't complete it correctly, and we requested them to finish it, and they said no. So we we used convicts to finish the roadway. And there's lots of interesting stories like that. In the 60s, the state of Florida, state road department was divesting itself of a lot of the roads, and that's when it became the actual under the ownership of Flagler County as opposed to a state road that we maintained. And many parts of it have been vacated over the years. The old Dixie Highway also crosses the airport property. They call it Old Moody Boulevard. It's been vacated. So it was originally the Dixie Highway. It went from Michigan to Miami, and the local governments were all competing to hope that it would go through their town for economic development. In Florida, it's split into two. We have the east, which is in our county, and you have the west that goes to Fort Myers. So back then, it was very important. They lobbied for it heavily, and it brought a lot of the original tourists to Florida on Model Ts to see the racing on the beach in Ormond. So in 2003, the county commission they hired a consultant to conduct a study. It was an environmental firm and an engineering firm who did that, and that's what allowed us to get this road on the National Register. And they created a management plan for us that had some recommendations. And so here are some of those recommendations. The number one thing the consultant recommended was that we get the logging trucks off the road. Starting around the 90s, as far as anyone knows, we started dumping topsoil and sand onto the bricks to protect them from the logging trucks. And that has continued to this day. Every so often, our crews go out there to reapply it as it is pushed off onto the shoulders, and they reapply it. But eventually, at some point, we will need to get those trucks off the road. Our staff, Heidi, Jorge, and myself, we met with our counterparts with the city of Palm Coast and a representative from Rayonier, Mr. Rice. I did ask him how disruptive would it be to get those trucks off the road and to just use the logging roads. And of course, he was, well, I say of course, but I didn't know. I had to ask, and they said, yes, that would be quite disruptive. So it wouldn't be fair to just all at once say, hey, get off the road. But I think at some point we need to have a plan to make it happen. And as I said, the area is coming under development pressures, and one day will be developed. There will be some crossings that are needed. So the residents and the people in that part of the county are going to have to cross the old brick road. And the management plan says when that happens, you should take the bricks in that portion that is now being crossed with asphalt and use it to repair other parts of the roadway where there's been damage or theft. What we don't know now is anything beyond conceptual as to what development will look like, how many crossings are needed. Obviously, the less crossings, the better. But again, you also need to have access for those residents. So there's going to be some number of crossings that are required. We just don't know what they are yet. The area would also be I would call it a linear facility for hiking, biking, tourism. The management plan mentioned things like kiosks, and signs and interpretive kiosks to help people understand the history. It recommended using some of the original type of signage that was on the Dixie Highway when it was first built. So a cultural resource and something for residents and tourists alike to enjoy for the history, for the countryside, for exercise and the like. Let's see, I think there's one more slide. Okay, so the topic of ownership of the road came up, and I would like to speak to that for a moment. Most of the lands out there, the deeds show the land that was transferred to these private owners goes up to the center line of the road. So in the title, the private landowners have the fee simple interest underneath that roadway, but the right-of-way is essentially a bundle of easements that we have. And I I've seen references to the state divesting itself of the local roads and how this road was taken off the state road map, but I did not see a document where officially it said, here, it's yours. It is ours, but I did not see a deed or a special act of the legislature or anything like that. It may be out there, but I haven't seen it. One thing we can do is to simply file a map in the official records to make sure that our ownership is in the chain of title. There's a statute that provides for that because we've maintained the road for at least 7 years. And in fact, it's been much, much, much longer than that. So that might be one course of action we may want to take. I also was considering whether we should file restrictive covenants. We are able to do that. Things that might say, okay, this road shall not be paved over with asphalt. On the other hand, I don't know if that's necessary because this county commission's in charge of whether or not it gets paved or not. And you could file a restrictive covenant and you could undo it with a subsequent document. So is it a step that's really necessary? I talked about the annexation. Palm Coast, they annexed the land. They did impose their comprehensive plan on that area, but there are no protections for the brick road in the city's comp plan. So we're really going to have to make sure that we assert that it's important to us and that we will coordinate with them when it comes to planning. That was all I really had on this topic. It was really just to kind of introduce you to this subject, reacquaint this board with something that has been on the back burner for a couple decades now, but because of the annexation, it needs to come to the forefront again. Yes, sir.
It came up, I guess, a year ago when we were talking about this, but it seems to me the first thing we have to do is protect either side of the road. Though, as you mentioned, the property goes to the center line, the developed property that can be developed, but we don't have a protection for that road. They can develop right up to within a few feet, as I understood it, this discussion over a year ago. So I think it's almost like the first thing we need to do is maybe it's a restrictive covenant, but set aside a piece of land up and down the strip that's inviolate, that they can't develop.
Yes, the consultant we hired recommended very large buffer areas. The right-of-way itself is 50 feet, and the bricks are themselves only about 9 feet across, plus a little curbing. So we do have 50 feet of area that they would not encroach upon. Beyond that, there's not much we can do. It's just private land. But within that right-of-way, certainly we can explore ways to make sure that it remains in its condition or perhaps has a parallel road on modern-day standards so that it is used for vehicular traffic, and then the brick road be used more for bicycling and tourism, equestrian, that sort of thing.
I have a question, Chair.
Yes.
Is there any way of maybe fencing in or raising sides to it for protection so that people wouldn't be crossing it? Or, as a preventative, I don't know that we would be able to build something around it or a side to it to the proportions that we could save.
Suppose anything is possible with enough funding. That was not one of the recommendations in the consultant's plan. I think as opposed to a fence, it might be better to engage the landowner and the city and try to maybe come up with a number of crossings as opposed to the exact location, and to say, okay, what can we cap it at? And because we know there's going to be some number of crossings. Whether a person walks onto the old brick road is fine. I mean, they can walk it all they want and hike it. But what we're concerned about is if there's too many crossings, roadway, asphalt crossings, you chop it up too much and it loses its character. Mm-hmm. A fence might not get us there as much as an agreement as to how many of those crossings there could be and how wide they are.
And how many miles is this?
It's approximately a little over 8 miles in our county.
And statutorily, why are we required to provide crossings? Why do we have to provide crossings?
Well, I don't know if there's
If
any.
landowner A lives on this side and landowner B lives on, or owns this side, why,
I'm not sure we're forced to do so, but there would be a lot of pressure on us to allow that access. It is a right of way, so it's designed to be a public road and something that people traverse. But it doesn't mean we just cave in and say, okay, whatever you want goes. But I think to say no crossings at all would be, I suppose we can't be forced to do so, but there would be tremendous pressure on us to try to compromise in some way.
to give landowners, I don't understand why. I mean, if it's going north and south, and there's no major road, where's the next major road to the old brick road?
Right now, not much of any.
Correct.
So
Now's the time to do it.
the beltway that they got money from the legislature for. I'm calling it a beltway. It's a ring road or a loop from Matanzas to Palm Coast Parkway. The one that the city got the money for the overpass over the railroad.
okay, yeah.
That loop it crosses the old brick road in two places actually. So already they're planning on crossing this roadway. What we don't know is how many more local type roads they would need, and I don't think they know at this point either, because everything is so conceptual.
Isn't that an elevated road? Crossover? Isn't it an elevated
Oh, the one that
crossover?
goes over the railroad. Yes. So that's another option. It'd be very expensive, but they could bridge over the old brick road.
Well, I think that's a small problem compared to how much of this road is already annexed into the city of Palm Coast and not in their protective plan.
I don't know how many miles, but quite a bit of it.
What was their, are they willing to, I guess, I think I'm confused right now. What would be the next logical step, in your opinion, for the county to take in preservation as much of this road as possible?
Yes, so we're very early on here. One thing is to file the map that I mentioned, just to kind of clear that issue up, and then to continue engaging in these discussions with the developer and the city of Palm Coast to try to move from the conceptual to something a little more concrete, literally, so that we know what's the size of the problem we're dealing with. How many crossings do they want or need? And I didn't get a chance to finish answering the question as to why. Well, you're going to have development on both sides of the old brick road, and they're going to have some sort of access. And so the question is how many, what is the character of that? And try to clear up any confusion I may have created. So Palm Coast annexed the area. They have their comp plan in place, their land development regs, but we still control the right-of-way. Just like, for instance, Colbert Lane is in the city of Palm Coast. It's a county road within the city limits. This is now the same situation.
I'm sorry, Sean. A lot of times people put up markers like they do in St. Augustine and other cities. So that makes it more of a tourism stop venture. And so with the historic background, I would assume that we'd be able to preserve the majority of it for the use of what it is, a walking path. I don't know why we're going so deep into easements and so forth if we already own it. I'm a little confused at where you're going with this,
Well,
my own mind.
we own it, but it is a public road. So right now, nothing is stopping, as I mentioned, heavy trucks from using it. We don't want that to continue forever because this was designed for Model Ts, not some massive logging
Or horses
diesel.
or whatever.
So we don't want them tearing it up. And the other thing, you could drive on it now with your own vehicle if you just were curious as to what it looked like. It's not gated. It's a public road. You can go drive it. So the purpose here is to just get this on your radar. We have some recommendations from a consultant. We have development pressure. So we have to start thinking, okay, how do we make sure this road is preserved for future generations? And I think right now, filing of this map is something I would recommend. And again, continuing those discussions, we've had some good positive meetings. Everybody went away. I can tell you the developer does not want this road paved. They agree that this is an amenity, something that is important for the area. So that's a positive sign in my view. The city too agrees. Don't pave that. It's there. It should stay that way. But elections happen, boards change, people move on. And we want to make sure that we don't lose sight of what our board recommended 20 years ago and what we're trying to get, updated here in the coming months.
The other question to that part is who's maintaining it?
We
Us or them?
Road and Bridge, our crew, our
have
staff.
for years.
I understand
Yeah.
that. So what happens when they step in and move in and build over there? Who's going to be maintained? We're still going to maintain it under their
Our road.
under
It's
their
ours,
property.
yes.
On their property.
My issue
Yeah.
is, so we, as a board previously, 2 years ago, we brought this up and we came to a consensus before you two joined to do our best to preserve it. So it's 2 years to get to where we're at now, filing a map. What is the quickest, most efficient way to button this up? I hate to say it like that, but quite honestly, that's kind of where I'm at. Like continuing conversations with Rayonier, and I have no issue with Rayonier. I get the logging piece; it's been going on forever. There's no other roads, so I almost think the logging piece is not an issue right this second. Mine is more of how do we get, or is there a consensus again? Do we have to do a consensus again to say? How do we do these covenants or whatever is it we need to do, and how do we do that sufficiently and quickly before things start popping off out there? I'll listen to Commissioner Dance. Maybe you have an opinion on this because,
Well, I haven't read the management plan. Can we get a copy of that?
Sure.
I gave a copy to Rose about 2 years ago, and she imaged it. It's this thick.
Right.
Yeah, because I read it. Yeah. So
There's
one.
probably good as a being familiar with management plans and other instances. Usually that they do a really good job of laying out a lot of the paths for being able to do preservation. I think there is, as far as I remember, I think it was hearing some of the plans from the city meetings or something. There's a consensus, like you said, of everybody that, linear trails are critically important in new developments. And you can look at the amount of importance we've placed on it, but also other municipalities in renovating rails to trails. And the Pinellas Trail is a great example that, contiguous miles of access to trails that help redevelopment and property values. So I think there's consensus of the importance of it. We have there's weight restrictions on bridges and different things. There should be something that I think a transition plan at some point. And what were you calling for what was the next step?
So he's discussing filing a map, correct? So that we get a
So that ownership is clear in
Ownership.
the title.
right. Okay. So that's the first step. And what is the estimated timeline for something like that?
That could be done quite quickly in a March meeting.
And do
It's
we
just
foresee anybody contesting that or no? Is that like a
Not that I'm aware of.
okay? And then the second step from that, you're saying covenants probably wouldn't be in the best interest of us to work on because they could be pulled off by subsequent boards and
Yes, and the fact that no one can go and pave that road now anyway, since it would be up to this board. So I just didn't see what would the point be.
This board could be 3 people that could pave it tomorrow. You know what I mean? It could always.
But the same is true even if we file a restrictive covenant. This
so
board
that's
could.
not necessarily a good path, right? I mean,
Yeah.
okay, so that makes sense. So then after the map, the ownership, you think the best course of action would continue to work with the city of Palm Coast and Rayonier?
Correct, because right now, unless this board has more specific goals in mind, right now the development plans are so far in the future and so conceptual, it's hard to know what an agreement might say or what the restrictions might be.
Well, pardon me, I just was thinking.
No, that's good.
There's no, at this point, they're still doing comp plan. There's no PUD or anything at this point.
Right.
So the next, in my mind, the language is was within the PUD when it gets to that point. Right now, you're saying it's our road, we have the right of way. So nobody can connect to it or disturb it without our approvals.
Right.
And there's enough traffic on it. If something was to happen, we would be able to see it and stop it pretty quickly, I'm thinking. But, so I mean, that protection is there right now. I think in development plans, right, the language in the PUD typically is the most important. Sometimes you can put those in comp plans as well, restrictions. We've
Yes.
seen it.
Yes, they did not do that.
But I would think the PUD would probably be the next best spot for me, is working with the developer to codify those things. When then by that time we'll know more of what a development plan looks like.
Right, right.
Now we don't approve the PUD, we will only have the
That's what I'm
ability to
saying.
influence it.
Mr. Chairman, just something of a side note, the historical societies are watching this real close also.
Sure.
So that they're an asset to us because they don't want anything to happen to that road. So.
Yeah.
Chair, if I could, and I don't know, Sean, would an interlocal with the city kind of memorializing what we're looking
that's
at?
sort of the-
And then a resolution from the board, would that work in the short time that we're waiting for the developer?
We can always do that. It's just that standing here right now, I'm not sure what it would say.
Other than, like, when we met with them, and just to kind of capture their thoughts, the developer and the city are in agreement with us. They don't want to pave it. They want to continue to celebrate it in the future. They would like to see it be preserved as a linear trail. They conceptualize having some sort of a city park in close proximity to it, and potentially using it as maybe historic festivals or events where maybe you would at a future time maybe have Model Ts back on there as part of a celebration. We know that they need some connection, minimum of 2, but we don't know how many more. So I don't know if it's kind of like keeping it at a high level, but kind of memorializing that in an interlocal with the city, recognizing that they get to determine the land use around it, we don't, and then having a resolution from the board. I just don't know if now if
That's
that
my
would
point.
provide something.
Point is, so managers change, boards change, developers change, and then the situation changes really quickly on it. But I think this entire county is the consensus that the brick road must remain regardless. So my question is more of, and that's probably a good idea, is and he was talking about doing it in the PUD, can we get them all to agree in some sort of resolution now that when it comes time that they'll
Well, you could have a different city council by the time the
Yeah.
PUD comes through, so.
Right, well,
Right.
but can we get them to agree now in some sort of interlocal that they will take into consideration? Well, we baked it into the comp plan, it looks like. Yeah. So are they willing to, rather than just talk about putting Model Ts out there one day, and letting people walk on it, are they willing to put it down on paper that they're going to agree to follow our comp plan with that road when the time comes? We don't have to talk about how many connectors, or I really don't want to box them into how many connectors are right now. I get it. I'm not trying to do that to the developer out there, because that is not premature of us to do that right now. But can we get them to say, in some sort of agreement, that when the time comes, like Mr. Dance said, and they're ready to do a PUD, that they're going to follow our comp plan on this road, or our plans, or
That makes sense, and we can make that request. And
yeah, maybe that's I mean, I if everyone else agrees, the map is necessary, but maybe we can do that.
Okay.
We have
yeah.
Jane by.
An agreement to agree, or an agreement to coordinate our efforts when the time does come.
Yeah, like, can we get that on paper now before people change and life changes, and we all recognize I can't, it's up to the chair, sorry. Jane.
We'll go to public comment, hold on.
We'll go to public home. That's my thought. Like, how do we all get on the page today we don't have to box in a developer
No,
or trucks or anything
don't
right now.
think so either.
It is like when the time comes for you to make your planning,
I think
this
the
board gets a say in
the
such a-
interlocal too could talk about inter-coordination at the PUD level. So
Yes.
our staff has the ability to review plans that affect the old brick road.
And I think at some point, we're going to restrict the use of that road. I mean, we're going to get to the point where we don't want the timber trucks on that road at all. So, I mean, that's something to put in whatever we do with it. We have to phase that. We have to get to a point where they're not allowed on there at all, but we don't want to just shut them off.
Right.
They've got to have some time to figure out what other roads to use, much as they don't want to do that. But so that there's a stake in the ground out there somewhere that says, at this point, and that'll be maybe part of the PUD process, but at some point out there, you're not going to be able to use this road anymore. It's going to be a walkway or a bicycle way.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I think it's more of a just getting it, more than talking. How do we get into an agreement that says we're all going to meet at the table when the time comes to talk about how we access this area?
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so if they're willing to do it, the group that's there now, great. Otherwise, then we go back and look at our options. They change. So.
Okay. That helps. Thank you.
All right, thank you. There seems to be interest in public comment. I'll open it up. I'll open this item up for public comment.
I'm not going to take 3 minutes. I'll take a lot less. As a real estate agent for 45 years, I got my license when I was 10. Leanne, I think we need a binding resolution on the property. So if the developers, your paper, a binding resolution in perpetuity, and have Palm Coast, everybody agree. So it doesn't matter who goes, who sells, who this, a binding resolution in perpetuity on the property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ron Long, 252 Auto Drive. I'm just wondering if all the municipalities are on board with this, if Palm Coast feels the same way, then what would be so hard about asking them to implement something into their comp plan that would protect the road long-term, rather than a resolution here, resolution there, what have you? If it's in their comp plan, then they're all bound to it until they all agree to change their comp plan again. But yeah, and if they're all in agreement with all this and everybody's happy, I don't think it'd be that hard to convince them to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anybody else for public comment? All right, we'll close public comment, bring it back. Mr. Moreland, you have enough information from us?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to the next discussion, Land Acquisition Committee ranking discussion. Mr. Mangle.
Adam Mangle, Growth Management Director. I've got a short PowerPoint just to share some of the items that we've been talking about recently at Land Acquisition Committee. And also going to talk briefly about a few of the projects we have. And a few of you may recognize these. And so these are from the ESL manual. These are the primary program objectives that we had. They were part of the Environmentally Sensitive Lands program. And so these were baked into the manual. These are those things that are helping with our prioritization, so that when we have a project that comes up, a purchase that's there, either fee or less than fee, those are the two areas we're looking at, fee being an outright purchase, less than fee being a conservation easement. We're purchasing development rights from a property. These are the considerations that we go through when we're evaluating those projects. And so you'll see there that this has that, and these aren't in any particular order. These aren't intended to be in a top-down fashion, but these are those primary goals. This is the secondary program objectives, and so you'll see maybe a little different from the first list. There are a few others here that on the next slide that conclude the secondary program objectives. But between these two, this gives you the framework for why we consider what lands we do and how far they move forward in the process of an evaluation for purchase. Ideally, on that primary list, to be ranked as what we're calling an A priority, one of the ones that we're pursuing actively, you should have at least 3 of these primary objectives being met on any particular parcel or property project that we're considering. And so out of these, at least 3 that you'd be meeting with anyone that's going to show up on our A priority list. And then the secondary objectives, here those 4, and then we have 2 more that are here. So you'll see there that there is, and I think only with that secondary, you see that you have very little mention of recreation. You have a lot of preservation, a lot of conservation, a lot of habitat preservation, a lot of things where we're trying to link up greenways, blueways. We're trying to do land acquisition beyond what the state had been doing. The state's had a listing out there for years, and basically the west end of the county is within that area, a priority area for us for a broader greenway. And so that for us, something that we recognize doing what we're doing, Land Acquisition Committee is definitely aware of it, is that we have something that we've referenced before, the Ocala to Matanzas wildlife corridor. And that's something that we've been very strong about. Land Acquisition Committee has prioritized acquisitions within that area, both fee and less than fee, at least so far by discussion. One of the things we've come up with, though, and the reason why I'm mentioning this now, reason why we're broaching the subject again anew with the Land Acquisition Committee, is that this is a first for us that I can recall. We've had several projects come in for less than fee. When we look through those priorities, it's a little hard for us to distinguish those project goals and distinguish those between those that we purchase outright, where we own the properties, we then control it. What we own, we control. What we don't own, we can't control. We're negotiating then as part of that conservation easement, some purchase of development rights, but the owners retain then some other ability. Often that ability is for some limited development, for likely some number of family homesteads. That's typical, something that's a very finite number. You identify that as part of your conservation easement. Perhaps some water-based recreation features. I'll show you a map here in just a moment. Some of those properties we're working with right now are on Crescent Lake. And so that one of the things they'll do is they'll have an ability to have 1 or more private docks that'll be on that property. Also, you can imagine that as we get into areas of the county that are on the west side, closer to the water bodies, we have those areas already in conservation. So one of the arguments is what are we buying exactly? Because we already have a conservation land use. We already have a development restriction imposed on those lands that says you can't develop it with any density at all. And so then, what are you in turn purchasing through a conservation easement? It's one of the things that we've been grappling with at the LAC. All this has led to what we've put together in a very preliminary fashion, a ranking matrix, a scoring sheet, similar to what we have had for years here for evaluating requests for qualifications that we have as part of a bid process. Well, we've kind of included this kind of same math. And hopefully today at our meeting at 3:30 Land Acquisition Committee, we'll have some real-world application of that with those committee members. And then as soon as maybe your March meeting, we'll come back with the results of that and look to you to rank based off of their rank and their recommendation, some list of projects. You can see here, this is the guidance for prioritization and ranking. This is what our manual says we should do. We should have some relative weight. And all this becomes important in the recognition that we have a finite pot of money. Where do we want to devote our priorities to? And so you've got to have some matrix, some way to be able to say, these are the things that are of properties, the acquisitions that are of greatest interest to us. These are the ones that are of lesser interest. And these things can take years to bring forward. The one I'll mention to you is the Townsend parcel. I'll call them out. That is a conservation easement as it sits now. It has been, I had met with them, representatives of the Townsend family, I think it's going on about 6-7 years ago now. And at that time it had already been, I think, worked on for probably 2 years prior to that. And part of the problem there, it's not for lack of trying, it's the amount of the number of heirs that you have. You can imagine older families trying to get that group to agree. And the problem you have is as, 5, 6 years down the road, you've got different family members reaching adulthood and coming back and saying, I grew up at that spot and I love Grandpa's cabin and I don't want to give it up. And so one of the things we've been talking about with them was what they can continue to do. And that's one of the key things when you start talking about some of these families. They want to be able to preserve the land, keep that future generation from jumping in and selling. These folks, in most cases, are land rich. They're money poor. And so and they're realizing that future generations, especially as development moves further west, especially along that 100 corridor, there's some significant pressure that may come. Your older members of the family look at it now and say, you know what, I'm okay, but I don't know what those future generations are going to do. I think my kids are going to be okay. I don't know about those grandkids. So part of what we're doing is some legacy planning for those families. So that in mind, not easy to see, but I do have a blue and green. Actually, the green shows up a whole lot better. So the greens are what I had identified as fee purchases, and this shows 3 right now. I think there was a 4th that I had listed. No, there are 4. Yeah, the one at the top, I've debated listing at that one that's, can't show you my laser pointer, but the one at the top it's basically right at the top in the center, that is Radiant, and that's the one that is the subject of your special meeting today. That is the one I'll give some more attention to more directly as I close. But then if we'll start out on the west side, so you can see then at that area where I've got 20, that marker on the left-hand side of the map, that's the Cowarts, David Cowart and his relations, his brother and sister brother-in-law. And that's going to be for a less than fee acquisition. What I try to do is make the blues less than fee. And so you have an idea of what we're looking at as far as conservation easement. They would continue then some silviculture, some agriculture activities more than anything else. They have some areas of pasture that are there on both sides of 100, also known as 20. But you have some good acreage that's there, and some pressure, I think, safe to say, that's being exerted there as we're seeing more development coming. We all know it's happening. And then moving down, we'll go ahead and go all the way down to Lake Diston. Just north of that is the Townsends, and that's where I have the blue star. There's actually 2 kind of parcels or projects in play with the Townsends. One that's immediately on the north side of Lake Diston, and then one that crosses across 305 where it comes in and starts heading over into Volusia. And so both of those are I think, being discussed there. Most all of those are, the discussions we've had so far have been less than fee. Would allow the family to still have some activity there, but we would be purchasing development rights, mainly off of the uplands. They're very realistic with us. They know that the closer we get to Lake Diston, there's a lot of wetland areas there, a lot of conservation, but we would be taking away any development pressure that's there. And then the blue star that you see just above that, kind of just offset to the right, that's the Cowarts Double C Ranch parcel. And so that's one that I understand they hopefully have made an application to the, I think it's called the Rural Family Lands Program through the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. It's a program where, unlike ESL, a family could basically get an agriculture easement. They could continue to farm properties and be able to get some compensation from the state through this legislative funded program. And so to the extent that that's been approached, I believe they put in an application. I believe they're on that list. I think they were ranked before, but they weren't high ranked, but hopefully there's some monies that have come to them. And certainly we can consider also on our side a less than fee acquisition. That does have, as you'd imagine, to the west, some conservation. On the east side, it's got areas of pasture that they've been doing, and they'd want to be able to maintain that on their property in perpetuity. And then our greens, above the words Flagler County, green that's there, that's a large tract that we've come into recently as a potential acquisition, and this one probably out of the ones we are looking at right now is the most valuable for us as far as that area of the wildlife corridor. It's if you can imagine there, and I would give you the boundaries, but I didn't want to kind of show the very specific nature of this. I'll do it at the next meeting. But if you can imagine kind of linear layout for the property running more north to south and into the thousands of acres as the count. That is known as the Peterson parcel. We're working with a group there right now on possible acquisition of this parcel. If you remember the fires, there were a few years back, the fires were there, and so that changed in some ways the character of that area. Had effectively a muck fire that had burned for several weeks, and so that still very much something that does have some very interesting characteristics to it. Yes, ma'am.
I have a quick question about that parcel. That parcel clearly can never be developed because of what occurred on it. So does it make sense for it to be in a land acquisition? I know you rank them, but I'm just curious if there's, when we know that absolutely nothing could occur there.
We have in our point system an allocation for development pressure, and so I'd quickly say that we've taken that into account.
Okay.
You know, I think that's something that always has to be into play because one of the things that we did have as the objective is there development pressure? Is it something that we need to move on now? We don't want to be the only buyer in a market that just doesn't really support buying at the time, and so that with this one, what I'd say is it's transitioning from more of a hardwood type forest to almost like a wetland marsh characteristic because of the way the burn had happened, where it had burned down through the muck, and so that we were talking there about some potential, maybe even a partnership. Don't want to get too far ahead of things, but we'd love to talk further with somebody like Ducks Unlimited, where what this would be is eventually almost like what I would think like Payne's Prairie. If you're familiar with that, where you had that roll of fire over the years, but that's actually changed the characteristic of the property itself. And then over on the east side of 95, starting at those bottom two, those are two that are in Palm Coast. We think that's important for our Palm Coast partnership, realizing that Palm Coast residents pay into this as well. So we got two pieces. The one, if you can imagine, the new Wawa on the south side of Wawa, there's a vacant piece. It does have a for sale sign on it, I believe now. I think it maybe still is on the market, but it's got comes out close to Clubhouse Drive. Would have an advantage of continuing some of that greenway parcel that we have that's part of the old canal that was there, St. Joe Canal. And it's also got some flood interest because that's the area that historically we've had some backups as the storms have happened. That basically serves as your headwaters of Graham Swamp. And so we've got some discussions there. That may be fee. We think it's probably going to be fee purchase for the east side. Could be less than fee. There is an interest on the part of the owner to continue to market and sell the west portion that's upland of that property. And then the other green star that's just to the side of that and north of that is a parcel that's on the north side of the toll bridge. Excuse me, if you know where the linear park comes out, excuse me again, city has the park underneath the bridge, and this parcel adjoins it to the north. It's 5 acres in size. It does have a portion of it that's within the right-of-way of the Florida Inland Navigation District, part of the intercoastals there. But it's a piece of property that may have some development pressure. We're considering that for acquisition and would then turn it over to the city for extension of their park, their linear park. This would be something that would be a logical extension for their linear park feature. And the most recent one that we have at the top, the last of our blue stars, is one that we had a meeting last week with a property owner. I don't want to disclose names on this one either. But this one is a piece that we're hoping for a while. And this is in between Matanzas Shores and Maritime Estates, a landowner that's had the property for a while and long-standing local family, and then wants to create that legacy. They want to be able to have some ability for the homes to be able to be maintained by the family, but then at the same time, remove the development pressure then that with this piece, I think is fairly readily acknowledged. This piece there actually has a mixed-use, high-intensity land use that's a very valuable land use and somewhat unique along the coast. The only impediment I think that's happened so far is the lack of water and sewer, or at least the relative paucity of those availability.
Did they come to us or we approached them?
They did, and something we've talked about internally for years, and it's something we're pretty excited about. Again, I can't give you too many details, but we're actively pursuing that. And we'll talk about it today at the 3:30 meeting if you want to come and attend. That Green Star, move back to that one, the one that is radiant. You may remember, there was discussion before, and this has been several years ago now, leading into the $3 million legislative appropriation. We had identified at that time, I think there were 4 tracks, maybe 5 total. Among them were the Townsends, a name that you may remember, Melvin. Rayonier Radiant was part of this. We called it Pringle Forest at the time. And these properties were specifically identified, and we received a $3 million legislative appropriation to pursue acquisition of that finite list. In the end, Radiant's the only one that's remained in play with us. This acquisition would end up being, at present, it's 3 parcels. They form back up directly into Water Management District parcels to the north. Rayonier owns to the south. These would preserve over 200 acres for that purchase. We're working with them right now to identify that extent of the land area that we would purchase with the $3 million based on the appraised value that would come back. So you imagine our motivation is clear and readily admitted by me. We're under a time crunch on the $3 million. Because of the age of that, FWC has been working with us beyond what they should. And so they've given us till the end of this month to close the deal. And so what we've had then, as recent as last week, purchase and sale agreement presented to us. The purpose of your special meeting that you'd have this afternoon at the conclusion of this workshop would be to approve the board's chair signature on the purchase and sale agreement for a purchase price not to exceed $3 million with Radiant for purchase of these lands. And what we would commit to you is that we would have those lands appraise out at $3 million, and would then, and we're working on it right now, survey work is underway, appraisal is underway, title work is underway, all to make a end of this month closing, February 28th. And so that's what we would want to have out of the special meeting then that concludes the workshop today.
Remind me on that one. Were any wells secured in that deal?
No, we had talked, and that was part of what we had initially hoped would happen, is have more discussion with them in a linear fashion on that well field. And so far, I think there's a lot that's in play with Rayonier and their land use decisions with Palm Coast. This is an area that they're comfortable selling to us. And again, fee purchase with these, we would make sure the appraisal value is appropriate. And then, we'd like to still have more of a discussion, because if you remember, about $10 million more that FWC has also given us, and we'd like to have Radiant as part of that discussion. We don't think at this point that $10 million would be include completely Rayonier, but at least the $10 million is not as restrictive as the $3 million was initially. This $3 million has to be spent in either the Melvin, Townsend, or here, and so this is the last area that's available for us to meet that deadline. Otherwise, we return the money. So with all that as the background, we are going to take this tool for the ranking that I mentioned based on those primary and secondary objectives. We presented it last week in a special meeting to the LAC. We're going to test it out this afternoon, and then we hope then to come forward with that. It will be something that we're hoping will be a subjective tool that can be part of the math that goes behind our acquisition process, and would be something then ultimately would be, at least the results from the LAC would be presented to you. Potentially the board could also use this same tool. What it would do is it would provide a point system for meeting those primary and secondary objectives, more or less. And so what you'd imagine is something that would say, does this extend then habitat area? If it extends it in a fashion that helps us link existing properties that are under public ownership, it would score potentially a 5. If it does none of that, it would score 0. And so it gives you a range also within that. So with that, that's all I had on the workshop. Again, giving you that background for the special meeting to follow. I'd be happy to answer any questions about either the ranking system projects that we have currently in the hopper or that special meeting to follow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I've got a question. And I haven't been to the land acquisition in a little bit. But there was discussion by Mr. Tanner, who was compiling resources for potentially Veranda Bay, and I know the floodplain area was another, not the entire Veranda Bay, but the floodplain area, which is under pressure from development, would be also I don't know if that's made it to the Land Acquisition Committee for research.
He had provided that same letter at our, I think it was our, let's see, which meeting was it? January meeting? And so that at our special meeting last week, Bryn Newton did mention it and wanted to have that added as a discussion point. We had reached out prior to Tanner's letter, actually, with the developer and asked them about interest, and at the time there was no interest. I don't know if that has changed. We will pursue that.
Okay. And I don't know. I know Mr. Tanner's, if I remember, was pursuing other partners in that, and I know the Water Management District might be a potential as well, due to the Bulow Creek headwaters and their interest. But okay, it's been brought forward, so that's all I was really checking on.
Mentioned, and you mentioned a point there in our point score matrix also, a partnership would score greater. And so that's something to also keep in mind, that if somebody had an acquisition fee or lesson fee, they came forward with other monies. And so going back to the example of Cowarts with the Rural Family Lands Program, that's something if they could come in with monies from that program through Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, we can stretch our dollar, that will score higher in a fee or less than fee acquisition scenario.
Right. Question? Yep.
Bear with my lack of knowledge of all of this, please. The project you were talking about that Commissioner Pennington brought up about the water, okay, is that going to be surrounded by housing? That it's a 3-acre parcel? I think you said it was 3 acres? 300 acres? 200?
Over 200, and right now, the first parcel that got us started with it was a 33-acre parcel if you can imagine, 55 acres in total, north side of Ranch House Grade. It's a parcel that runs between US 1 and then over to basically to the railroad tracks. It's got some historic significance, we believe. We do think there's some archaeological artifacts potentially that are there. This is very close to I think it's going to be the Hewlett Branch, Hewlett Sawmill. And just to the south, to give you an idea of the development pressure, there is a residential subdivision that's going in now. And then also to the south, this adjoins, south of Ranch House Grade, is a parcel that's the mill itself that's under the ownership of the Ag Museum. And then just to the west of that is a gopher tortoise recipient site. And so that we've got good proximate public uses next to this 33 acres. Rayonier would retain the street frontage in this scenario, the 55 acres we were originally talking about. They'd retain the street frontage for some commercial use, and we would get the better of the parcel. We would get that part that's more, at least historically significant to the west. And so that, answer your question, development pressure is definitely there to the south. And this would further protect Pellicer Creek's headwaters, Hewlett Swamp, Hewlett Branch, Pellicer, or the Pringle Creek and Pringle Branch and that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yes.
So I'm holding up the score sheet, right? Okay. So you're using the term development risk, development, threat?
Threat.
Development, like we know that the the land is encroaching and getting smaller. Okay. Where on these scoring criteria, I don't see it spelled out like that, or is it just an overall concept that development's coming and we need to score high in these certain areas?
I was going to pass that out to you, but we were actually making changes to it so that, there should be a criterion, I won't be able to tell you
which one. Okay.
right in front of me, but if you go further into the packet, it will talk about, and then it will link back to the cover sheet.
Right.
I think that, reflects zoning, probably reflects access to utilities and different things that make it desirable for development, and we would, so that would push it up the list so that the more important to save it with those pressures.
That's exactly it. And then, like in the case of our west side parcels, we're looking then at, okay, is it on a major roadway? And so in the case of the Cowarts, you've got frontage then on 305, realizing that utilities are not present there.
Right.
You do have an ag zoning in place. So we're going to score down maybe on the side of pressure, but nonetheless, it's still there. And so we'd still kind of judge that out of a 0 to 5, that may score somewhere right around a 3. But certainly your question, if you had utility availability, if you had the zoning in place, that I think would be at the level of the high level. That would be at a 5 as far as development pressure.
Right. So this just was in an inbox email. Are you going to send out the new one as well?
Yes, we will. And hoping that's going to be, we talked about it last week with the LAC. They
I
had some
missed
changes. We were trying to get it published where we could get it to you. And so we wanted to take it to LAC, have them look at it and give their thumbs up, and then try it today is what we wanted to have happen, and have them do some rankings.
Great. Anybody else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Got everything you need from us?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, we'll open this one back up for, where were we at? Land Acquisition Committee, public comment, if anybody would like to speak on this item. Come up, please.
I just sent everyone a picture of a piece of property that the county could take over for nothing. It's 8 acres. It's been abandoned for 13 years. It faces a community of over 5,000 people. The landowners have never pulled a permit. It violates every safety code in the state of Florida. It doesn't pay its property taxes. God bless Post Snowden is trying to knock it down. Right now, they owe $250,000. I don't know why we never asked for interest. It's 3.5 years old. If the county would file the other lien for $1,000 a day, effective November 15th, that would give us another 90-some-odd thousand. They signed an agreement May 12th, 2021, voluntarily a day before taking title, that if they didn't do everything by August 21, the county could just knock down the building. So here you go. You got 5,000 aside from Island Estates, the community of Plantation Bay, Flagler County, and the new section across the street. We pay a tremendous amount of property taxes. We have no shopping center. We have no supermarket. We have no public transportation. We have a park that's 3.5 miles from our home. And here is a property. I just sent you a picture of what it looks like 5 days ago. 13 years. You can get this property for nothing. But what is Adam doing while he's trying to negotiate with people? He's actually spending our money, not our ad valorem money, our money that comes in from builders and permits, and allowing these people to try to make an extended stay for welfare people. And you're talking, and now his land development committee is going to meet, which is a public meeting. I can't be in 2 places at one time. It's about time. The county hasn't paid for foreclosure. You can foreclose on this property. You got 2 liens on this property. I have argued in court pro se, Heidi, and written my own briefs. I'll be glad to help do some legal work, because you're talking about buying land. This is the first thing that you should take for free. You can rezone this. It's over 8 acres. I talked to Faith before she was unfortunately fired, who saved the county millions of dollars in grant matches that you don't even know about. I asked her, I said, what would you think of a softball park? Something for kids, or a combination. There's a neighbor of mine who would like to have a church. I said a church would be fine as long as you had a playground for kids. And you're talking about land acquisition. This is what you should buy first for free. This is disgusting. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're talking environmentally sensitive lands, but I was.
Environmentally sensitive because it's sensitive to the 5,000 people who live here.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to speak to this topic? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back. Budget kickoff. Ms. Petito.
Well, thank you for allowing us to share with you the fiscal year 26 budget development. The county's budget process is governed, as you know, through Florida statute, Chapter 129, which outlines the preparation, adoption, and implementation of the county's annual budget. As the county administrator, I'm also the county's budget officer. So I'm responsible for preparing and presenting a balanced budget that aligns with the county's strategic priorities while also complying with statutory requirements. So although I'm the one presenting this to you, I have here today our financial services team in the back. They're not just here in support, they're the ones who actually do the hard work in getting this document together. So this is a look at the agenda for today's pre-budget discussions, and I'll go over each one of these in a little bit more detail. So this is the budget process that we will be following with the development of our budget. The budget process is a structured, transparent effort that ensures responsible financial planning for our community. It begins with the pre-budget work, where staff assess financial conditions and priorities. During budget development, departments will propose needs and funding allocations, followed by a thorough review by county leadership and by the Board of County Commission. And then citizen engagement is a key component. We will allow for public input and discussion. And then after careful evaluation, the budget is approved, formally adopted. And then throughout that process, we continue to provide clear communication, ensuring transparency, keeping residents informed about the decisions that shape our community's future. So that's just a look at the formal process that we go through. Here's a look at the fiscal year 26, calendar year 2025 budget calendar. So this calendar follows the same format as last year, where we provide approximately a dozen opportunities for community input, reflecting a series of dates, deadlines. All of the external or public meetings are shown in blue on the calendar, and then all of the internal staff meetings are shown in green. So it's quite detailed as we go through the process. Here's probably a simpler look. This is just looking at the timeline. It actually started in December, if you recall, when we received 2 newly elected officials on the board. We started talking about our budget in December. So through December and February, this is when typically we conduct department budget planning meetings, review of financial forecasts, and then we actually do the budget kickoff. So the budget kickoff starts with you guys today, and then tomorrow it will actually be with the department heads as well as the constitutionals. And then through March and April, it's really the budget development where we're looking at capital plans, operating, performance measures, strategic alignment. That's when the department budgets actually come together as a request. And then kind of some of these overlap a little bit, but through April and June, we'll gather revenue projections from property appraiser, state agencies, even our county departments, from our contractors, where we know we will have like a CPI increase in some of those contracts. Earlier today, I know we talked about the medical examiner. We're trying to have better alignment with their process to make sure that we don't end up with the same issue that we had this year. And then in June, we'll finalize the expenditure requests. We'll begin preparing the tentative budget. And then July 1st, the property appraiser will certify the taxable property values. July 14th I will be submitting to you the tentative budget. And then in August, we'll do some final review of the budget. And then in September is when you'll be holding your public hearings and adopting the final budget. And then October 1st is actually when the funds become available. And then we start the process of really implementation and monitoring through December, and then it'll start back over. So the budget process essentially doesn't really stop. It, is continuous throughout the year. So just wanted to kind of provide you that look. And then last month, we had some discussions where we were working with you to establish the board's policies and priorities. This was the first step in starting the development of the fiscal year 26 budget. I'm going to briefly go over these just to make sure that we continue to be aligned as we move forward with the creation of the budget. So as we prepare for that upcoming budget, our focus remains on aligning the financial planning with our strategic vision. This process will ensure that we have sustainable growth, not just staff, but also our programs. We'll address any economic challenges and meet the evolving needs of the community. We will incorporate current economic conditions, including inflation and market trends, to make more informed decisions, and then we'll ensure that every dollar is spent effectively, maximizing value through efficiency and innovation, identifying and utilizing grants, partnerships, and other funding sources to help extend our budgetary reach. And then in alignment with our strategic plan, this year's budget preparation will focus on maintaining fiscal responsibility while supporting key priorities that drive long-term community benefits. We're looking at a flat or reduced millage rate. We aim to achieve a balanced budget that reflects prudent stewardship of public funds. Our key funding priorities are going to be focused on beach management, employee retention, and merit. We will restrict new operational or program spending unless clearly identified and justified by urgent need or offset by cost savings elsewhere, really just to ensure that all of the budget requests demonstrate a measurable impact and alignment with the strategic objectives. So as we evaluate our capital projects, we'll conduct a thorough evaluation of all that's proposed and ongoing, prioritizing projects that are critical to community safety, infrastructure resilience, and items that have been deferred as part of our maintenance. We'll continue to protect and enhance the quality of life for our residents while ensuring financial stability. So as we move to the budget development, we have several uncertainties that could impact our financial planning. We have some upcoming union negotiations that may lead to changes in labor costs, while anticipated increases in insurance premiums and contract adjustments could affect the overall expenditures. Additionally, there are potential legislative changes. Holly mentioned a few, seem to be a repeat of last year, that may introduce some new financial obligations or shifts in funding. But we'll continue to monitor these factors closely to ensure a responsible, balanced budget. So today, staff is really looking for consideration of approval of the budget guidelines that the board has previously provided, as well as the calendar as it's presented today. As I mentioned, today is our kickoff with you. Tomorrow will be the kickoff with staff and the constitutional officers, where we send out the message of what the board would like to see in the development of their budgets. The budget development process itself is very comprehensive. It's a collaborative effort that requires significant work, not just from our staff, but also careful consideration by you, our Board of County Commissioners, and then valuable input from the community. So we look forward to working together to develop a balanced, forward-thinking budget that supports community growth and well-being. And that concludes the presentation that I have for you.
Questions for Ms. Petito? All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for the update and for the outlook I think it's really important that we know the timeline and what the steps are along in the process. This is the critical input time. Your next is critical input from the constitutional. So we will look forward to the next steps. And I know there's a lot of constraints that are out there that are going to be weighing on us. Move forward.
Well, thank you. We look forward to the collaboration of working with everybody and bringing you a balanced budget, and look forward to the process. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll open that one up for public input. Anybody have any input on budget presentation? All right, seeing none, we'll move forward, close public comment, move to the airport ordinance discussion. Mr. Mangle, good to see you again, sir.
Adam Engel, Growth Management Director. You've already received a copy of an ordinance. We thought that would be the ordinance, but in the end, as I was prepping for this meeting coming up, I went on to the state's FDOT's aviation office website. What I intended to do was I was going to take our ordinance we had previously prepared and then compare it in a tabular form to what the statutory requirements were from Chapter 333 for airport zoning. I was surprised then to find that the state had adopted new guidance as recent as 2024 for us for use by local governments. I think it's 124 total pages, and included within that guidance was a model ordinance. And so best flattery is plagiarism. I took the whole thing and given you the model ordinance. Changed happy to glad where it called for the generic name of jurisdiction here, put in Flagler County, and then also made references to our airport. And all of this is based on this graphic. This is 14 CFR Code of Federal Regulations, Part 44, I think is the right one. And these are those surfaces. This is for the civil airport. This is something I stole out of that 2024 guidelines book. And this then dovetails with what we had given you before and what you'll see now. And so if you can imagine at the ends of the runways, these are the things that you see these areas referred to as surfaces, areas, zones. They have different nomenclature. And if you can imagine, they have this three-dimensional aspect to them because they're based on airplane overflight over these areas. And so that you'll see these, probably the biggest one that you'll see and the one that captures the largest area for us is the conical surface drawn around those airport air runways themselves, the airspace, the facilities on the airport itself. So primary surface is your runway. You have these approach surfaces shown here in red that are that direct area where planes are coming in and out, either landing or taking off. Your conical surface that extends outward, horizontal surface, and within that also, and then this transitional surface. All this is okay. How does this look for us? Well, or more correctly, what does each one of these talk about? Horizontal, you saw it, flat plane, 150 feet. Conical, outward sloping zone from the horizontal surface, additional clearance. Primary surface, centered area along the runway extending slightly beyond each end, with varies based on the runway type and approach procedures. Approach surface, extended area beyond the runway end. If you wanted to read along, you don't have to read these. These are all taken right out of 14 CFR Part 77. Transitional surfaces, the sloped areas connecting the other surfaces, ensuring a smooth transition between them. This is the one, how does this look for us? And so I wanted to give you this graphic, but there's two things at play here. We wanted to go through and kind of check it again, make sure that it's correct. This is all moving very quickly. GIS has done an amazing job of putting this together for us. We've had this for a couple of weeks, but I do think we need to vet it a little bit more. And then the other part is I want to emphasize to you that if you adopt this, airport zoning regulations, you're not adopting a map, different than the approach we had before with the other ordinance, where we had this suffix that was added to the zoning where you could look at it and you could tell, okay, I'm part of this. This one, I think, would be better use of our GIS if we could identify on a per parcel basis which of those surfaces, which of those areas a particular parcel is subject to. So geographically, you've got your parcel, and then above it, you've got these different zones, whether it's transitional zone, the conical zone, whatever it may be, and these may overlap. And so that rather than have a static map where I can sit there and go, yep, there you go, you got it, a single parcel could be subject to multiple zones depending on where it is proximate to the airport itself. And the way our regulations read, at least as the model ordinance is written, the most restrictive of those zones is the one that will apply. And so that's a bit of the backwards rationale here with this. I want to emphasize to you that while this may end up being the graphic, I don't want you to feel restricted that this is a map that you would adopt versus a GIS, a data layer, a data scheme that would have parcel-based data that would tell someone whether they are or are not within this. Maybe this becomes a database. Maybe this becomes a lookup that you could do on our website in some way. And this is something that I'll give you some more direct information on a macro level. We reached out to GIS also and had them do one more step, tell us how many parcels we have. We actually have a parcel list of those parcels that are subject to these zones, so I'll share that with you in a moment. But I could see that maybe being the output of this rather than approving a map. Vice Chair Pennington, you looks like you had a question, didn't you?
Well, no, well, I think I'm a little confused. So is that saying that now? Is that saying that now 333 in the overlays now apply to further than we thought they would? Basically, like, do we not think that? I guess I'm confused. So.
This graphic was actually based on our prior ordinance, and I think it's still defendable. I think it still represents that and those limits. Effectively, nothing's changed between the old ordinance and the new ordinance as far as these zones are established. If that's helpful, I don't know if that helps or hurts, but down on the inset, down that you see there on the right-hand side, what that is, and you'll see this better also, the dashed line that you see along with the kind of the lighter coloring inside the dash versus the outside that's kind of a grayer, that's the limits of the airport boundary itself, the airport ownership. And then that dark line that's inside that kind of looks like it comes out in points and follows along the airstrips itself, the runways, that's our noise contour. That's a 65 DNL noise contour. That's important to show to you because it's intended to show that the entirety of the noise contour sits within the airport boundaries itself. I do think I've got a population that's showing up. I think it's still showing we've got 5 people that I think are within the noise contour if I got the data right. We got to run that down and see why that's happening because I don't think there's a house in there unless it's one that's on the airport. We do have a couple of out parcels that are just to the, effectively on the airport property, if you would call it that. Somehow we're picking that up. I don't know why that's happening. It's not part of the airport property, but it's just north of that. There's some older houses there, and I thought they were all vacant, but for some reason, on Old Moody, on the north side of Old Moody. And so I misspoke. I didn't mean to say airport property, but it's something. If you're there, you think it's part of the airport. It's not. For some reason, you'll see that here in a graphic here in a moment. That inset is the same as what's in the center of that conical. The conical being the big circle that you're seeing. That's there, the kind of the brownish color. That's in the center. That is identical to what we see on the right-hand side. So what I did, I asked GIS to show me each one of these piece by piece. These could certainly be superimposed over aerials. This is over that kind of macro map to keep the size down as far as the file size, so we could show you those. But that's the extent of this is the extent of the horizontal area. This is that one that's the flat surface that was referred to. So this is the extent of the horizontal. This is the conical, a little bit bigger. And so as far as that reach of those, conical is a little larger than your horizontal. Conical goes up and does have that three-dimensional aspect where it starts to get into your airspace. Primary being your extent of your runways themselves, and remember that we also have the one that's in the lake, so we do have the water runway. Your approach zones, and then you have an area that's adjacent to the approach zones called transitional that shows up. And so then these areas together are what should be identified, I think according to my notes, if I had it right, these should be part of what is known as the airport height notification zone. So each of these all contribute to, on the ground, things that can be constructed and that would cause some concern to air operations. So in our case, we have a Part 77-100-1 notification surface based on the runway links that we have. If I'm reading it correctly, and I always look to Roy to correct anything I'm getting wrong on this. And you'll see lots of mention in the model ordinance that talks about notification. And so right now in the short run, when we didn't have the ordinance, that's still going on. There's still FAA, notice of the obstruction permitting that's going through, a notice to airmen if it's required for temporary obstructions that are within the airspace. Things that are permanent would need to be permitted if they're in such a way that they would be within one of those transitional areas. If they be at the end of an approach zone, those would be things that would be frankly prohibited because those would end up being an impediment to air operations, to airside operations. Frequently, I think the assumption here within airport zoning is that airport zoning in some way would do something grand beyond the extent of the airport. This is a requirement through DOT to preserve the airspace. And so we really shouldn't be thinking in any other terms other than that. This is something to protect your public investment in your airport itself, and that's what this does. And so this particular notification process right now is happening at the FAA level through the aviation office. This would make it more of a local type process, but still requiring FAA sign off and submittal into the FAA database if the ordinance is adopted. So 2 zones will be established: the airport height notification zone, these zones that I just showed you, and the other zone is the airport overflight zone. Within the overflight zone specifically, you'd have the runway protection area, and this is a separate surface identified at the ends of those runways, and then the noise contour. And so these two together would form your overflight zone. So along with that, we had this before. I'll tell you, this was the one that had the extension. I think this is in Chapter 333. This is the one that's half the distance of the runways. You would have a prohibition on new residential construction. I believe that this still does apply. It does apply, but the language in the model ordinance seems to move right beyond this. It has a listing in the model ordinance on prohibited uses and says that your prohibited uses included in Chapter 33 are those that are listed in Chapter 333. And you can see there off of Seminole Woods in the U section, there's an area where there are several residential lots. In the Z section off of Belterre Boulevard, there are several there as well. I've done a count. I think there's up to about 24 that are vacant in that area in the U section, and there's about half a dozen that are in Belterre Boulevard that are vacant there. And so we have not talked with our counterparts at the city how that would be handled. Would it be a cutout? It would be a taking if this was adopted, because what would happen is new residential construction occurring on those residential lots would be prohibited. Mm-hmm. Those that exist now would be treated as nonconformities. You saw that addressed in the regulations, and so you would have the ability for someone to continue to have their home. We would not have any regulations then on the amount of improvements and things like that. It would be strictly limited to damage. So if you had something, a catastrophic fire, hurricane damage, then you would come into play within possibility of those homes not being able to be replaced.
Have we heard from the city of Palm Coast of when they intend to adopt this?
So we have 2 paths with the plan with this, and you saw it mentioned likely in Chapter 333, those who have read that, very exciting statute. But what it has is it has 2 parts in the way you implement this. One is through adoption of an interlocal that with all the affected jurisdictions, presently limited to Flagler County as the owner of the airport with the majority of the land area, airport itself within the confines of the unincorporated county, our enclave. And then Palm Coast, and then Bunnell. One item that had come up, Flagler Beach was saying, do we need to be part of this? We had sent something to them. If they annex in the west side of Randa Bay, they will need to be part of this. It picks it up just on its extreme northwest corner of Randa Bay, south of Colbert Lane. It would pick up in one of the zones. It would pick up the Randa Bay project. So we could accomplish it through an interlocal. Alternatively, Chapter 333 says that you can do this through an airport joint planning board. We had met first back in 2018, staff members, and said we didn't want to do that collectively with all of the jurisdictions. And so we would recommend interlocal. I think we could accomplish it through an interlocal.
I have another question, sorry. One more question. The airport new residential construction restriction zone in the blue, it appears to me that that includes land that we previously approved for apartment housing. Am I right or not right?
Yeah, you're right, yes.
What happens there?
Well, right now, luckily, it sounds like we're out of that business, so it's going to end up being another big box, the way it sounds. And we do have to confirm this map. This one was one that I wasn't real sure about this because our previous zone that we had and the language we were using before was the extent of the noise contour, the 65 DNL. And that 65 DNL was abutting to, that's why we had the noise expert come forward. That's why we went through all that discussion before. And that was just to the south, abutting the property, the subject property. This one's now showing that that property is entirely within it, and that would prohibit then certainly multifamily from being developed there. If this map stays. I'm not sure after reading the new model ordinance if there's that section on prohibited uses that to me seemed to water it down from what we had had before. And now it refers directly to, well, whatever's prohibited in 333 is what's prohibited. You need to go there and look first. And I still think that this applies because this has the half the length of the longest runway as establishing your residential restriction line. And that's in the statute, so that I'd have to go back and look at it again to make sure that I read it right.
I feel like when we approved that, that was brought up and we were told it wasn't in the zone. So it's just something to not think about. I mean, it's done, but hopefully they'll go commercial. I mean, it's just something to discuss.
When we were talking about the noise contour.
Contour.
I think that's what,
right.
I think that's where the confusion,
You
and
think so?
I would still say before we had produced this, that the noise contour set our limit. And then this then had, and I have to go back and look, if this one was in lieu of the noise contour, we'll follow statute one way or the other.
Right. Oh yeah, I have that. I know what you're talking about now. Sorry.
We did ask GIS to put this together, so again, I just want to make sure you had this so that you know this. Again, you're not adopting this map series. We do need to look at these, make sure that these are correct, but you wouldn't be adopting these maps per se as much as what I would envision is likely some kind of lookup table, a database, where somebody could put in their address and then be able to say, okay, am I subject to any of these regulations? And it would, if the interlocal is successful, be something I think that the county would maintain. You put in your address, and then it would come back and tell you, yes, you're under the conical surface, or you're under the conical and the transition zone, and that the conical is more restrictive if you're planning amateur radio. If you're an amateur radio operator at your home, you may want to contact the airport to make sure that you get the sign off. Actually, I think that's exempt, but it wouldn't hurt probably to still talk to Roy.
It appears all the Grand Landings is out of the
Yes.
out of this.
Where's the hospital in this? Can you, is it
Right.
way up here?
Right there. Yep.
Okay. So what's this must be commercial. That must be, what's this?
That's the Chevy dealer.
Oh, really? Okay.
There was a small area just about in the center where you can see the reference to State Road 100 East. That may be where we're picking up some of the, I think there's also a population count you'll see in a moment that comes into this with the restriction zone. Certainly we've got those houses in the U section and the Z section that are presently developed. But there were some other houses that are there. I think all of that on the north side of 100, safe to say, is transitioning into a commercial type development use. And then, go ahead.
So based on the runways and the required space, do you see any extension ability of these runways?
I think that, maybe I'll defer to Roy on this. I think that we're at the fullest extent. Because the runway had shifted to the south, but I want him to talk about the master plan. I'm not familiar enough.
When was this picture taken? This map?
This one should be,
What year is this map?
23. 22.
does not have the BJ,
22?
still has the RVs there. We do have Airport Commons is developed, so I'd probably say closer to about 2023. You can still see the RV.
So BJ's and Longhorn,
and all
they're
that
not
is
on
there.
here.
So 2023 is what I put it at.
So
Airport
that's in
Commons
the
is-
sound zone, that's in that blue area.
yeah,
Right.
and this one's a residential restriction, not a sound zone on this.
I want to confirm what I'm looking at. That's why it's backwards in my head. I'm left-handed.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Roy Seeger, Airport Director. So 1129 could be extended ultimately, right now to 5,500 feet. Ultimately, could get extended to 6,500 feet if the need was ever there for it. Runway 624, the crosswind runway would not be extended.
Again, on our end, we do need to confirm
Right.
both what this shows and then also that it's still an appropriate zone after the model ordinance. This was one that I had, was based on our first ordinance we provided to you. Wanted to make sure you knew this, if this continues forward, that this possibility there in the U section, the Z section, could be very real for us then to be talking about it, a taking. I just want to make sure you knew.
So, quick question. The other thing is that was in the ordinance was that you have to create a joint airport protection zoning board. Is that something that we'll be doing, or?
So that's what I mentioned to you. It should be the two parts. If you look at that, it's either
Yeah.
right above it or right below it. It says you can either do this through the interlocal or the
Interlocal,
joint board.
okay.
And so
So
our
we
hope would
would-
be interlocal.
Okay.
Because we didn't want to get in. We thought the joint board would be too
Right,
unwieldy.
understood. Yeah, that's what you're saying.
And then a couple more slides. So with this, we did that parcel count. And so wanted to get, these are not the entirety of all the land uses that were identified, so that if you summed all the bullets below, you would not get 16,120. I left some out. There was some condominium, there was some commercial that was there. I tried to hit some that would be of greatest interest to us, remembering that depending on where you are within this, multifamily, churches, areas of assembly are concerned. So those things I wanted you to know about, and I also wanted you to know about county-owned parcels, municipal parcels that were within this. And so that's why I wanted to display this to you, and just kind of for you to get an idea of what's underneath those maps as we just depicted them now. And so again, these are in that first series of the maps. Those are the transitional areas, the protection zones. This is the parcels, number of parcels that are within each of those categories. And to give you an idea of population, we do have the ability to be able to provide some of that information also. GIS was able to give us some of that. And so you have, at its largest area, 23,086 based on 2024 estimates, persons within the conical zone. So we're still picking up 5 within the noise zone, 5 within the primary zone. I don't think that's correct, because that's actually somebody living on the airport. We need to talk to Roy about a squatter. But we'll run that down. We'll figure out what that is. It may be easy to fix. But you've, as we expect, 0 within the runway protection zone. You still have some areas there that we have some population. Again, this is where we're at now with this. These would be the estimate that's provided for each of those particular zones.
Oh, I think it's more like a question for legal. Was the city of Palm Coast, we were to adopt this statute 333 and this plan, right? But the city of Palm Coast also was to adopt it, correct? So
That remains an open question. I think they
that's
are, but we could also do it through an interlocal.
Well, my question is this, because we're talking, and this is pie in the sky right now because we don't know. When you talk about the potential taking and that, was the onus on the city of Palm Coast to also adopt if they provided the zoning approval for those areas? I guess that's a question to look into.
Sure.
Sorry.
I would answer in the affirmative, but I think that there are this for the most part is a compatibility land regulation, and so it extends beyond your airport. Misnomer is airport zoning. It's not zoning your airport; it's zoning those areas adjacent to it that are affected by your air operations. And so it's something that I think was appropriate for the legislature to come back and say, you all need to do this, local governments, because I think that they saw that there were more and more of those situations coming back to them of, I've got problems. They were hearing from the constituents. And this isn't, this is one method to solve some of that, but it's not the be-all, end-all.
Some of this could be grandfathered in because it didn't go into effect till 2016. So like the school and the this, that, and the other could have been prior to, including the housing.
That's right. Platting at U in the U section, platting in the Z section.
Right.
All predated that. The argument then is, okay, if you do extend your airport, your airside operations, your airstrip, your runway, then you're increasing some of those zones. And that's hard to avoid that. And we did have, and I don't know if y'all remember it, on that main runway 1129, I think is what he referred to it as. I always get the numbers wrong. But if you remember, there was a plat that was approved off of Seminole Woods. And it was approved by the city. We had to go back and buy some of those lands because that area actually ended up within that primary zone. And so we bought land.
That was on the west side of Seminole Woods?
Yes, west side of Seminole Woods, yes, sir. Yeah, east side of the airport, west side of Seminole Woods.
Right.
Because that ended up, when that plat was approved, that had the possibility of having vertical construction that would end up being something that would affect airside operations.
I think Epic Church is cleared for a new church within that zone.
Oh, they are.
Within that blue zone.
One thing to mention while I've got some time is that the way
the
this
fire
reads,
station, their new fire station is in that zone too.
and the conical,
In the one back, the one.
the horizontal.
Yeah, the expanded blue circle that was.
I think for the most part, your model ordinance, my take on it, did not necessarily have an outright prohibition. You do have that section on prohibited uses where it says refer to Chapter 333 for guidance here. But to me, what it was doing was it was putting the onus back on the airport itself, the permitting. It was that everything needed to be tied to a permit and authorization prior to its ultimate land development permit being issued, so that if you're within one of these areas, you've got to have some extra review. And I think that's the acknowledgement that's here with this, that this ordinance is, for the most part, a notification, a process step. And something that I'd say that we've done pretty well, but we've also had one-offs where we've missed them. We've had some work on the cell tower. I want to call it out because I don't remember if it exactly had, but the monopole at the stadium at FPC, I think had the approval. The hospital had approval for having a crane there, if you can imagine, temporary encroachment, notice to airmen that would be issued. But the Tractor Supply, with its tilt-up walls, I think did not, if I'm remembering correctly. And so we've had a bit of disconnect there. We try to catch them as we can, city and us both working together. But you've had, for the most part, we've done a pretty good job, thankfully, and that's been reflected in the safety of our airspace. With that, I'll close. Await any questions or comments. With this on its track right now, it would go to first reading March 3rd. If you do have edits that need to be made, and I've got some comments from the county attorney, I would emphasize that this is DOT's model ordinance. They do emphasize in their text leading into this that model only, you can still tweak it, but I don't want to get too far kind of beyond their bumpers that they've given us. But I do think that what you'll see back on the 3rd will be something in substantial form, substantially the same as what you see here now. Thank you.
Any other questions from Mr. Mangle? I will say, I think in a quick review of the cities and our zoning maps, it's pretty exclusive to commercial within that one blue one few pages back. So it's been, I think over time, we've gotten to that. But there's still agricultural along Belterre that we'll have to keep an eye on within the city. Okay, very good. Yes, sir. Mr. Sager.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add one thing to this. So what this was based off of up here is based off our current airport master plan. So you see that one big approach area that's coming into runway 11 outside the
Right.
nautical? That's going away. So that will be going away. That's currently in our airport master plan because that was set aside for an instrument approach. We will not be getting an instrument approach. We would have to, that's an ILS, that's an instrument landing system. That would be light across, going over Belterre into neighborhoods. We're not going to get that, right? So that big area outside the conical will be going away. Yes, and that will be updated with the next master plan.
Okay.
But Adam, I didn't want to change Adam because this is based off the airport master plan that's currently adopted. So that will really make a lot of those numbers that Adam put in there go down considerably. I'm sorry? Yes, that, not reducing the circle, what's outside the circle. Correct.
Right.
Correct. That'll go away. Correct.
So what next steps do you need from us?
None today. Just
Okay.
wanted to introduce it to you. Wanted to show you what we had as the new model. And if I could dovetail what Roy just said, that's another reason why you don't adopt maps with this, because this is a bit of a moving target with this. It'll be based on the most recent airport master plan off of their layout. And then also that noise contour. If we do that noise study, then that noise study will move. Yeah, you can always adopt them if you want to. There's no prohibition on doing that. But I'd still want to have that database is what I'd be pushing for. Use the data, use the GIS, use the ability for us to do a parcel lookup. But that's going to be a significant reduction once that non-instrument approach, the instrument approach is eliminated. You know, that whole leg there to the west side would basically be reduced at least by half or more.
All right, so looking forward, first meeting in March, what will we be seeing?
You'll be seeing the model ordinance in substantial form as what you had presented to you.
Are we workshopping that, or is that that'll be action?
That'll be for first reading. You can make changes at that meeting. Would ask that if you do have changes, make them at that meeting, and that way we can then vote them up or vote them down, and then have them come back then for second reading.
Okay.
And so you would have a second reading schedule on this because it does change the actual list of permitted or permissible uses in a zoning district. We've treated it that way. Otherwise, second reading adoption, March 17th.
Very good. Any other questions? Thank you, sir. I open this one up for public comment. Anybody wish to comment on the airport ordinance discussion?
Hi, Jane Gentile, Youth Plantation Bay. I've got a lot of questions. I hope that this ordinance is sent to every homeowner who has complained about noise. I looked at this ordinance, and what I could glean from it was that it was written like everything, like Flagler County Airport wasn't even built yet, like the homes weren't even here. It lists all kinds of requirements. There are homes that have been built before flight schools were introduced by Jim Darby, which really was shocking to me. We did not have flight schools here until 2005. This ordinance does not address the danger of touch-and-go landings, and it says the airport is for public purpose. You talk about landing, but this ordinance does not even discuss touch-and-goes, which should be prohibited from this airport altogether. And those homes that are grandfathered should be offered a buyout from the county and Palm Coast if the touch-and-goes do not stop. If the airport goes back to what it should be, which is an FOB, fixed-based operators, you would never have this airport noise. You wouldn't have to worry so much about the overlays. And by the way, you do need radar in this airport. This is absurd. This is beyond absurd. With a growing population, we have no radar. It is absolutely absurd and no instrument landings. But you have to do something about the people who bought their homes here before touch and goes were landed. were allowed, because I don't see anything in this ordinance which it should prohibit touch and goes. And that, I think, would clear 80% of the problem that is going on with this airport. This airport is not being used for public use. The touch and goes give us absolutely no benefit in Flagler County whatsoever. They give no benefit. They pollute. These little small planes use leaded fuel. We don't know who they are. I did try to get the 6.5 million blocked from FDOT, but it's too late. They already gave. What do we need a terminal for touch and goes? We don't even know who these people are. We don't even know if they have permits. Terminals for fixed-based operators and corporations, I say this over and over again. The ordinance is written, does not relate to Flagler County as we exist today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back. Any final comments for Mr. Mingle? All right, we will move to the comp plan discussion. Passing that one along. Good job. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
You have to state your name.
Simone Kenny, planner.
Thank you. All right.
I know that to Carlos. A PowerPoint. He's still not.
We all beat
It's all right. You guys can leave. All right. I'm not. No. It's don't they normally meet? I don't know where they're meeting. Probably. All right.
Take notes.
All right, so we're back on.
Just wanted to give you guys a chance to stretch your legs.
Well, you
that's
had it
all.
right at the beginning. It said recess. We should have recessed while we worked out the issues.
All right, so again, Simone Kenny, planner for Flagler County. And this is going to be our first in our series of workshops going over the goals, objectives, and policies for the various elements of the comprehensive plan. The agenda for the presentation is I will try to very briefly go over the plan update process overview. I know that some of you have seen these slides before several times, but for those who haven't, or for anybody in the audience or online who hasn't, I just want to go over what the process or what we're doing looks like again. Then I'll briefly recap our public engagement that we had throughout the process, and then relate that to the changes that we made in the various elements. And then finally, I'll go over what the next steps look like. So again, what is the comprehensive plan? It's a document designed to guide the future actions of a jurisdiction. It presents a vision for a community's future with long-range goals, objectives, and policies. It helps residents identify their vision for the future for their community, can help coordinate local decision-making, and it also provides guidance to landowners and developers. We are updating the comprehensive plan because it allows the community to update its vision for future growth. It empowers jurisdictions to plan rather than react to new development. It provides an opportunity for the community to reevaluate its current decision-making practices. It empowers the community to identify and address existing and projected opportunities, and it is required by state statutes. I want to take this time to emphasize that our last comprehensive plan update was in 2011. Now we have our comprehensive plan, and the tool that we have to really implement that plan is then our land development code. That's the day-to-day regulations that people deal with the most. Our last update was not followed by a land development code update. So many of those policies that were in there were not implemented. So that's why you might see some of those repeating in this new plan. It's just that they're still good policies and we haven't gotten around to it, but we will be following this comprehensive plan update with a land development code rewrite. Again, we have our project website. That's tinyurl.com/Flagler2050, or anybody watching online can scan the QR code. That's the landing space for all the information relating to the comprehensive plan update. And then briefly recap what we've done so far. This project started back in June of 2023. We had our first public workshop August 2023, our second in January of 2024, and then our third in June of 2024. And the last time the board has seen an update to the process was last August, so it's been a few months. And in that time, we have been revising our goals, objectives, and policies, and that's what we're workshopping now. That should take us potentially to April or May, where we'll have our transmittal hearing, send that to the state, get it back, and then hopefully by the end of summer of this year, we'll have our adoption hearing and we can publish the plan. Again, so public workshop number 1 was just asking residents to tell us what they thought of the current conditions. It was about land use, parks and conservation, housing, economy, transportation, utilities, really just to get residents thinking about these sorts of topics. We also had our project website survey talking about similar topics, and we had 890 survey responses, which we were quite proud of. We asked people to rank different initiatives by priority. And so the first priority was preserving and conserving our natural environment and wildlife habitats. The second was addressing stormwater drainage and flooding concerns, then preserving rural area and character, then ensuring adequate water supply for existing and future populations, then ensuring that all income levels have safe and affordable housing options, and then improving the county's public school system. The survey also asked people to address what their concerns were. So the highest concerns were infrastructure, traffic, impact on natural environment, crime and housing and affordability. And then it also asked people what they were most satisfied with, and those were our greenways and trails, connectivity of roads, bicycle facilities, as well as fire and EMS, law enforcement, and libraries. Then we had public workshop number 2, which was just the start of our visioning process, getting residents to think about what they envision for the future of Flagler County. And that gave us our community vision statement, which is really the overarching guiding statement for how we address the changes we make to the comprehensive plan. And so that vision statement is that in the year 2050, Flagler County will represent the best Florida has to offer: scenic waterfronts, working farmlands, and charming rural communities preserved through the strategic cultivation of growth and walkable and vibrant neighborhoods served by resilient and sustainable infrastructure. This also gives us our vision directives, which kind of gives us direction on the actual changes that we make to the comprehensive plan. Again, we start to see a pattern here now. The directives were to increase resiliency against natural disaster, improve drainage, diversify local industry and employment opportunities, concentrate future growth to existing urban areas, more affordable housing, sufficient and clean water supply, conserving the natural environment, maintaining and improving facilities, supporting working agriculture operations and industries, establishing safe bicycle, sidewalk, and trail network, and then preserving the charm and character of our rural communities. And then our final workshop, we asked residents to help us identify the specific strategies on how to implement those directives in the comprehensive plan. So now as I go through the different elements, I will pull from these directives the specific strategies that the residents provided and worked with us through, how that informed our goal, and then our objectives and policies. So the first element we have is the conservation element, the purpose of which is to ensure continued identification and protection of significant natural resources within Flagler County, in particular for surface waters, wetlands, floodplains, vegetation, and wildlife. The related vision directives that pertain the most to this element were conserving the natural environment, and some of those identified strategies were to continue the ELS program and then expand the tax or potentially establish a sales tax dedicated as a funding source, ensure passive recreation opportunities are prioritized as part of that conservation, partner with organizations, and then identify habitats or ecosystems worthy of protections and potential purchase. And then the other vision directive was ensure a sufficient and clean water supply. So establish a plan to convert septic to sewer, particularly near surface waters, test water for contaminants, explore alternative water sources. And again, these vision directives are not exclusive to each element. They will overlap and you will see them repeated because they do correlate with the different elements, but these are the ones that most succinctly matched with this element. And that informs our goal. Goal 1, conserve, protect, and manage the natural resources of Flagler County to ensure the preservation of the county's environmental assets for future generations. I think you'll see if you compare this version of the comp plan versus the last, we've really condensed all the goals and to have one goal, primarily one goal for each of the element, then have our objectives, which really just organize the policies that fall beneath them. The intent was that a goal isn't something that's implementable like the policies are. So we really wanted to give power to the policies and have the goal as the overarching theme for what those are. Here are all the objectives in the conservation element. I'm not going to go through all of them I just wanted to highlight 4 that were of particular concern to the residents. We have Objective 1.2. In an effort to preserve agricultural production, Flagler County shall coordinate with federal and state energies and develop a program for farmland conservation. 1.5, Flagler County shall protect the quality of all surface waters by conducting or cooperating with monitoring, evaluations, and study efforts. 1.7, Flagler County's wetlands shall be conserved and protected from permanent physical and hydrologic alterations. And 1.8, recognizing that Flagler County is a water resource caution area and depends on the Volusia Floridian aquifer, designated as a sole source aquifer, the quality and quantity of Flagler County groundwater resources shall not be degraded. And then here I just pulled out really the new policies that we added to the comprehensive plan. A lot of the existing policies were changed slightly to update them to meet state statute, but these are the ones that were really in response to the public engagement that we had. So the county shall conduct a study to evaluate whether the hammock area on the barrier island should be identified as a special ecological district. The county will work with USDA and the Rural Family Lands Protection Program to facilitate the purchase of farmland conservation easements. We should investigate the opportunity for establishing a farmland conservation program, because I believe to this point we don't have a formal way of taking those in, or any kind of regulatory process for how that looks. Potentially develop a map and list of large agricultural producers to establish priority. The county shall utilize the DEP septic tank maintenance program and specific septic tank guidelines, and then evaluate the efficacy of establishing a regional wetland mitigation bank. And then any questions or comments before we move on?
Policy Con 1.14.4. This is a this is a carryover from the last one, but this caused a lot of problems with development. You know which one I'm talking about? This is the statement that says the land between A1A, any scenic road, and an open body of water, the density will be limited to the lowest density available. That is written the same way. We just copied it over again. And this caused a lot of problems over in the hammock, because people interpreted that literally, that from A1A to the Atlantic Ocean, they called that as, and then we disobeyed it. The Jungle Hut was where it came up, the Jungle Hut Road development. So if we're going to put that in there again, I think we need to either, I think you interpret it as it should be the lowest density for that period. I believe is what you tried to bring up. Or that, no, your position was it didn't apply. But this has got to be rewritten. It's got to be explained or somehow made clearer. What is our intent there? Because our intent, as I always understood it, was further south in the county, where A1A and was next to the ocean, and there was just one lot. Okay, one lot between the road and the deal. As you get north, you get through the swing, and you get anywhere past that. You get into hammock dunes, ocean hammock, and you get all that up at there. But then the road, there's about 0.9 miles between A1A and the ocean. So does this apply? If it doesn't apply, we need to say something about that, or we're going to fight it again, the next development that comes up. So we need to fix that.
We'll revise the language to clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments or questions before I move on to the next element? All right, our next element is recreation and open space, the purpose of which is to ensure that Flagler County continues to provide high-quality public facilities in a manner which meets the needs of existing and future populations for recreation and open space purposes. This was an asset of the county that residents were most satisfied with, but there were some vision directives, one being establishing connected and safe bicycle, sidewalk, and trail network. This directive will also be duplicated when I present our transportation element, but I think it can fit into our parks and open space as well. So that's just creating a priority list of connections, ensuring that trails connect to green spaces and recreational spaces throughout the county, including the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and potentially having complete streets design methods with bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And then the next vision directive was maintain and improve public facilities and services, so enhance the park system. The idea of developing a regional sports complex is something that came up more than once during engagement, so we included it. And then also requiring sewer connection along the coast, improving, maintaining roads, and improving beach access. So that all develops the goal of to ensure provision of sufficient parks, open spaces, and recreational facilities and programs to satisfy the health, safety, and welfare needs of all Flagler County residents and visitors. We had 8 objectives in the recreation and open space element, and I really just wanted to highlight Objective 1.2, which is that lands purchased through the Environmentally Sensitive Lands Program will protect, preserve, or restore ecologically significant areas for environmental protection and resource-based recreation. And then Objective 1.6, that Flagler County Park and Recreation facilities shall include vehicular, bicycle, or pedestrian access facilities where appropriate based on the natural resources, physical environment, and available funding for construction and maintenance. All Flagler County parks and recreation facilities will provide accessibility to disabled patrons in accordance with all federal requirements. And then pulling out some of those new policies again, that we would utilize the newly adopted Parks and Recreation Master Plan to prioritize the type of facility needs and the community's desires. Again, that we would evaluate the feasibility of developing a regional sports complex, that the county would consider a referendum to extend or expand the voter-approved millage for the ESL program or establish a specific sales tax for that purpose. And then that through the development of review process, the county would ensure that all development proposals are designed to limit the visual impact on the scenic highway corridor. Again, that's A1A in the northern part of the Barry Island, including natural buffering and including low-impact signage. Any questions or comments on the parks and open space?
Yeah, I have a couple. 2.6, beach access, it talks about 1 per mile. We're really trying to get 1 every half mile, I think, would be the goal on that one. In H1.3, I think you need to include the fact that it's an all-American, H1A is an all-American road.
In the policy, okay.
A1A is all-American road. And then I have to find 1.5.11. Well, I can't find it, shoot. But it called a partnership plan, and I don't think we have one. I'm trying to, if I could find that again, but it's 1.5.11. And then 1.6.6, it talks about our transportation disadvantage plan, but it didn't look to me like we do what it says we're gonna do. That might be one of the things that you talked about earlier, where there were things in there that we just didn't do. And I think that's one of them. It talks about a plan for getting the disadvantaged transportation to our parks and beaches and have a specific plan to do that. I don't think we've done that.
But would we like to include it as that the Flagler County will implement that kind of program?
Well, I think it's
Shall
worth the
investigate.
discussion because I don't know that we have enough buses and drivers to do that.
Okay.
We're kind of stretched right now taking people to medical visits and things like that. So it's probably worth a discussion if we want to even put that in there.
Okay.
But it says we're doing it, so,
Yeah.
and I don't think we are. I don't think we are. I don't think it says we'll have a plan to do that, and I don't think we do. So, anyway,
All right, any other
I think
questions?
it's worth a discussion.
Any other questions or comments on parks and open space? All right. The next element is intergovernmental coordination. The primary directives that came from this is a topic that everybody's been talking about, at least specifically today, addressing annexation and infrastructure in future growth areas. So one strategy that came out of the engagement process and working with our consultants was the potential to establish an interlocal service boundary agreement with all the municipalities, which is kind of a more specific type of interlocal agreement, really looking at what areas can they serve, what areas are they willing to stop serving, just so that we as the county can get a better understanding of what kind of annexations can we at least try to anticipate so that we can plan and address those. And so that guides us to our goal for intergovernmental coordination, which is that Flagler County will develop and maintain intergovernmental coordination mechanisms necessary to achieve a consistency among local, county, and regional plans and policies, and coordinate all development activities in order to improve delivery of services, enhance the quality of life, and protect the natural environment. So there's only 5 objectives in this element, but this is one of our longer elements in general. Pretty much what you'd expect, that we will establish a formal intergovernmental coordination with the municipalities through various types of interlocal agreements, and including that interlocal service boundary agreement, that we would continue to review their comprehensive plans, they review ours, same with the CIPs, and that Flagler County shall attempt to resolve inconsistencies between adjacent local governments and state or federal permitting agencies through negotiating techniques. Pulling out the first main policy, the first part and Part A is an existing policy from the past comprehensive plan, and then Part B and C are what's new and have been added. So Part B states establishing a joint planning committee with the municipalities. We would prepare a coastal resources management plan to address all natural systems, including bays, estuaries, and upland communities on a system-wide basis, regardless of political boundaries. And that we would prepare a plan for establishing an interlocal service boundary agreement with the municipalities to address annexations, roadway maintenance, utility service delivery, as well as law enforcement and fire service.
You said this would be pulled out.
The first part of the policy is from the current
Previous,
plan. Yeah, and then
right.
we're adding parts B and C. So we're not pulling it out.
Okay, sorry.
And then policy 1.2.9, the county will continue to maintain countywide level of service standards for county and state roads by working with the Volusia Flagler TPO. This was formerly called the River to Sea TPO, but last year they voted to include all of Flagler County within their planning boundary and updated their name to reflect that. And as a heads up, we should be expecting an interlocal agreement with the TPO in the next few months to finalize that expansion into their boundary.
I have a stupid question. So what is the Joint Planning Committee now, if it's already in there?
That is another one that's been...
Doesn't exist?
Doesn't exist yet from the last policy.
What?
And then policy 1.5.7, that the county will collaborate municipalities and regional agencies outside of formal structures to ensure efficiency of services. And that really means just staff communicating with staff. Any questions or comments before I move on to the last element?
Well, just a question for Heidi. 2.2.1, it says we have an interlocal for beach management with Flagler Beach. I think that that sunsetted, right? I mean, we don't have that anymore, do we?
You entered into a couple different documents with the City of Flagler Beach. So you had the one pertaining just to the Army Corps, which is done.
That's done.
But then you also had interlocals with Flagler Beach and Beverly Beach that talk about the non-federal projects and how they would assume responsibility for maintenance once it was completed. When I say maintenance, it's maintenance and renourishment.
Right. Okay.
Those still exist.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and our last element of the day, infrastructure, the purpose of which is to provide inventory analysis and future needs of potable water, wastewater treatment, solid waste collection, drainage and stormwater management, and natural groundwater aquifer recharge under the responsibility of the county. The related vision directives were to improve drainage systems and then ensure a sufficient and clean water supply. And this element is very large and technical, so we had two goals for this one, the first of which pertaining to water, wastewater, and stormwater systems, and then the second which pertaining to our solid waste collection and disposal services. So we have 6 total objectives, again, one for water, then solid waste, and then coordinating with the local governments, quasi-governmental entities and private utility providers. Just because the county itself is not a utility provider, it becomes a little tricky for us to get that information from the municipalities that do sometimes. And then ensuring that natural functions of aquifer recharge areas will be protected and maintained to the greatest quality possible. And then again, some of those pulled out policies were that we would continue to coordinate with utility providers to monitor facility demand, that we would coordinate with the utility providers and hopefully prepare annual summaries of capacity and demand information, and that we would comply with the Lower St. Johns River Basin Main Stem Basin Management Action Plan, which requires on properties an acre and smaller on the west side of the county to use those advanced treatment septic systems, those ATUs. It's a smaller system. It reduces the nutrient load, but they are more expensive and require yearly inspection by the health department or by DEP. And that our last policy that the board, with the advice of staff, would ensure through the regulatory process that major drainage systems, both publicly and privately owned, are to be inspected and receive required functional hydraulic maintenance on at least an annual basis.
Wow.
Any questions or comments? Yeah.
On 1.16, so we have, in past development reviews, received an intent to provide service without really explanations of capacity. So is that changing? Will we be asking for capacity figures instead of just an intent to supply? Or is that?
I think we'll certainly try. By state statute, we can't require that the developers give us that information until the permitting step. So we're preempted to kind of require that information.
It goes under the prior one too, which is the Intergovernmental Boundary, Joint Review Commission as well, because we have to be somewhat transparent with that information at the project review time. That's it. That's my comment.
1.1.1.14, the basic management action plan and require advanced treatment. Where do we cross with the health department on that?
So all septic tank permitting is through the health department.
Health department, right. So can we say that we're going to require advanced treatment of septic systems? Is that in our ballpark to do that? Or is that in their ballpark to do that?
It's in their ballpark, but there are certain projects, certain lot of record, even at the building permit level, where normally due to the lot size or the requirement, we wouldn't even allow it to pass through zoning. But with the, saying that we would allow the ATU systems.
So we can do that. We can say that in the permitting process. We can direct that they put in the advanced system.
We can't direct them, but I think what I'm trying to say, for example, there's quite a few lot of records out west, and people, will come to us and ask, is this lot buildable? And we'll try to do a buildable lot letter for them, giving them zoning verification. And then depending on, some of those are very, very small lots. And so while we can't say you have to put in this specific type of septic tank, we can say, okay, at least there's room for that.
Is the health, well, just out of your, Adam, maybe is the health department getting real strict about that? I mean, are they have to, yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, and the next steps, we're gonna keep continuing on with these workshops. I also want to say there is flexibility here in how we structure these. If you like the speed at which we went today, or if you didn't, if we want to have a special meeting for these, if you would like to see the information presented in a different way, let us know and we can accommodate that. But we're anticipating at least another 2 or 3 workshops to go through the rest of the elements, or if you decide any one of these needs to come back for further discussion. And then hopefully around April or May, we can have our transmittal hearing, send it to the state. They'll review it, make some comments, send it back to us, and then we have 180 days to make revisions based on the state's comments and have our adoption hearing, hopefully by the end again of summer of this year, and then starting in fall, moving on with our LDC rewrite.
Question, can you go back in the presentation back to the green conservation area? Because I think I missed some parts of it, and I just wanted to make sure. So we'll start from the beginning. So, all right, so then you went the next page. Got 1 point. And then the policies were identified. So are these new policies based on, if you go back again, there's lots of objectives.
Yeah. No, so there's a lot more policies in the actual elements themselves. These are just, I pulled out and highlighted the new policies that came as a response to our public engagement process.
Okay, so if there are comments on some of the other policy or the prior, if you go back again, as we go through, natural resource protections and floodplains, if there are comments about additional verbiage for those, will we get those back to you? Because we really didn't cover that at all.
Yeah. You can send comments back if you want to pull specific items to the next workshop and have those discussed again at the next workshop. We can do that as well.
I'm just concerned that we've right, the problem we ran into on the Highway 100 commercial project was our inability to further review wetland impacts beyond what the Water Management District regulates. We default to Water Management District regulations, which was problematic and doesn't really give us the teeth to enforce our policy statement in the natural resource protection section. And then the other one was in floodplains. Flooding is problematic. I was curious to be able to analyze additional floodplain protections moving forward, and I don't know if we've addressed that.
There are some updates to those policies.
So I know the LDC is where we take care of the specifics of that, and I know we've got objective 1.6 is floodplains, and 1.1 was up there on natural area preservation. Just wanted to make sure we've got everything covered to be able to address those in the LDC when we move forward.
Okay, I can pull those objectives out and add them to the next workshop if you want to have a more in-depth conversation about those before we move on to the next elements.
Okay.
If that works.
Do you know what the next elements are going to be?
Still organizing those. I know it won't be housing. Housing has to go to AHAC again. We're still making the finishing touches on our future land use because that's the largest, meatiest element. It'll most likely be transportation, economic development.
Can I be so forward as to say what we probably are looking for is an advance of what we're to expect. So when are we going to have when are they going to be coming to us, transportation, those elements, and when will the next ones be coming to us so that we can actually do some additional research on our own in advance of those elements?
I can get those to you by the end of this week.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
I have a real quick, are we starting a joint planning committee so that it actually matches our comp plan verbiage?
I think this becomes, after we get all this
Well,
stuff
it's
out
in
of
the
the
last
way,
one.
that's what we start to implement.
So it didn't get one.
It would be an action item once the comp plan is
Well, yeah.
adopted and then we work on those interlocals.
It's in the current comp plan, so it should
Was
have been.
never
in the
acted on.
Okay, so we need to kind of be marching towards doing it this time, right? Okay.
Almost a list, really, of action steps that the comp plan is
Gonna make us
is telling us
implement.
to do, so we can start
Yeah.
checking them off.
It's not just in there, we're actually going to do it.
Right. So it doesn't
That
just
would
sound
That would
good.
be refreshing.
Yeah.
Just a final comment. This entirety of section E, go in and take a look at that again. It doesn't match the structure of the rest of the sections. And it can be difficult to follow where a section ends and then starts up again.
Okay, I understand. I'll take a
Understand
look at
what
those
I'm
again,
talking
yeah.
about? That the other D and the rest of them they follow pretty good, but this one is kind of chopped up. If you just take a look at the structure in there.
Sure.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
A general question. I was looking at some, I don't have them with me, but some Northeast Florida Regional Council maps on recharge areas, and it didn't look like we had aquifer recharge areas in Flagler County. Do you know if that's true or not? Or do we have maps of where our recharge areas are? Or is it all shallow? No, there is some aquifer recharge, okay. I'd be curious just to know that. Where? Pardon me?
Aquifer recharge should be right there in that area, Pringle Creek.
Okay,
We'll verify that.
okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? And a follow-up with, as you dig into and read more, feel free to follow up with Simone. Thank you. Public comment on comprehensive plan, anybody? Wish to address the commission? All right, seeing none, we'll move to other items for discussion. Anything, Ms. Petito? Are we good?
I didn't have anything. Just wanted to remind you about the special meeting to follow.
Okay,
Mr.
all right.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
I had an item I was going to bring up. Sorry.
Under the
Is it
workshop?
okay to bring it up or?
In the workshop?
Like, yeah, in the workshop.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know where else to bring
I
it up.
thought we were
so-
ready to shift to the other
Okay.
one.
It's a 2-minute thing. It's a 2-minute thing. Only because I feel like I need to bring it up. and it is about the agricultural museum. So it's good in.
It's no longer the Agricultural Museum, it's the Florida Legacy.
Right. So I wanted to bring that up just to get an idea of what's going on or consensus. And since you're on the board, it's good to get an update. But I guess is the new members probably don't know, there was a statute that made it the Agricultural Museum, 570.901. The state legislature removed the statute over the summer. So it is no longer operating as the State Agricultural Museum. Now, the property, from what I could tell and meeting with administration and legal, was done in two, the property that you drive to now and you drive up the drive and the barn, that was gifted to the agricultural group, the nonprofit there, by a private entity. And then there was the county side of the property that was the county conveyed over to the Agricultural Museum. And in specific, the deed said that it had to operate as an agricultural museum per 570.901. And it had to operate to the benefit of Flagler County and not to the benefit of any other third party or person. So my question, I guess, for this board is, now that the statute's not there for that parcel of land, not their main parcel they operate on, is what, if anything, are we obligated to do as a board to talk about what does the county need to do to help with that particular parcel of land, if anything? Are we to, should we advise legal to look in to see what does it mean if it no longer operates as an agricultural museum and no longer operates to the benefit of Flagler County and only operates to the benefit of a third party or person? Is there any onus on us as a board to look at that? Because it's rather, and I'm not talking about the main parcel, that they operate on, which was privately donated. I'm talking about what is it that we need to do as a board, since the people of the county conveyed it over to the nonprofit to operate as a Florida Agricultural Museum per statute 570.901, and it no longer does. And the deed was very specific that it had to operate to that, and it had to operate to the benefit of Flagler County. So I guess I'm looking for a consensus from members of the board to see if we want to instruct legal to look at what, if anything, is our options, remedies for that particular parcel of land, not their main parcel, but for that particular one. Is that clear as mud? Or
Clear
Well,
as
do-
mud.
do you- Yeah, do you think they're violating it and then get to some third party is taking advantage of it?
No, here's my honest thought. And I was not here when the Florida Agricultural Museum was built out, the thought of it or the plan of it. But I believe that the county conveyed land along Pellisier in that right corridor of that property, specific in the intention of having a Florida Agricultural Museum that would benefit the taxpayers specifically. So we thought we would have tourism, that we thought that we were doing the right thing by conveying a very beautiful, important parcel of property. Now, the state has come along and wiped that off the option after many years. So
Well, they just renamed it.
no, the state said it's not ours. They renamed it, that's correct.
Right.
But it no longer, to this deed that the county gave that property, it no longer fits the restriction of the deed. It no longer can operate as a state principal museum because there is no statute to ensure that. And the deed was specific to state that it must operate to the benefit of Flagler and no other. So what is the right thing for this board to do for that piece, that parcel, to ensure that the benefit continues to be to the people of Flagler County for that parcel of land? It's a difficult conversation, but and that's why I'm bringing it up, because it just happened this year, which is, are we, by overlooking it, are we saying as a board that we are comfortable with a nonprofit continuing to operate the portion that the county gave for the benefit of the people if it no longer complies with the deed restriction.
Well, are you positing that they are not?
That's what I'm
For the-
actually, the only thing I'm hoping to get consensus on is maybe we have, just to have legal look at that.
Well, the membership from Flagler County residents is increasing remarkably. And yeah, I would say that it benefits not only Flagler County residents, but the residents of the state of Florida.
And that's,
But I'm not sure why you want to do this. You want to close them? You want to close it down? You want the land back?
No, because, well, maybe on the right side, because what I'm specifically saying is the land that they operate, their operation today was given to them by someone else. So they would continue to own that land and operate on that. This is the corridor up at the other side that's not in use. And what I want to just ensure, if anything, I'm not trying to shut it down or take it or anything. I want to ensure that what was the original intention for the property, and I want to make sure that we're not giving land away, valuable. We talk about ESL land all the time, conservation and everything. That we're not conveying that over to something that we no longer set it aside for. We gave that property to operate as an agriculture museum, and that the state's involvement would be there. It is no longer there and does not match the deed. So my question only is, at this juncture, is should we as a board ask legal, if anything, are we supposed to be doing something to ensure that we are, and Mr. Hadid's asleep, so I can't.
Commissioner, is the land, did you say it's not being used now? Is it just sitting vacant?
It's not the main parcel that they operate on. The main parcel was conveyed, the drive, the barns, the buildings, that parcel was conveyed over by a private entity.
But the land that the county gave them, is it in use?
Yes.
And what is it used for?
They have trail rides and tours and.
But private, it's a private use, right? So we thought there'd be an ag museum, the county, when I look at the historical and read it, thought that there'd be an ag museum with some tourist component that would benefit the county. Right now, it's just a private use facility, like an event.
But is it the Ag Museum that's giving the trails and the tours that you mentioned, Commissioner Hansen?
Yes.
Or is it a?
I don't understand the private use. There's no private entity out there. It's a 501(c) organization.
But so my question is, they're operating a strawberry festival and community markets where they lease parcels or whatever. Does that benefit the county, or is that a benefit of any third party or person, which is not allowed? My only question is, and it really is, what happens to that land that we gave if they decide, can they sell that piece of land?
No.
No.
If they sold it, this restriction would run with the land. And they are allowed to lease it under the deed. I've got the deed in front of me.
I got the deed. Yeah, so my only question was, what is the board, do we want to continue? Is there anything we can do to, help them? I mean, these are things we're supposed to be looking at. It's no longer going to be an ag museum, period. It's not, the state's not going to be involved, it doesn't look like. So how do we help them, or if we do at all, with our parcel and ensure that they're, operating to the benefit of the county? I hear Mr. Hansen's thing, and that's my only question is what do we want to see happen to that parcel? Do we want to help them operate it? It's just a question for the board. If we want to say, pay today, this is it, we're never coming, I don't think Pam understands.
I would be concerned about what happens
I'm more concerned.
at the end of whatever. If it was deeded or leased or whatever we're doing with it, deeded for A, and it's no longer A, then yes, we have an obligatory duty to make sure that our lands are functioning as we suggested it's going to function. And if it doesn't, then yes, we can't sit aside and say, oh, well, this group came in and changed everything, and what if they somehow declare that it's their property? I'm not saying it is or it isn't. What if they did? What if they fought us for it? What if something happened and they inherited or they came into millions of dollars and the whole system looked different or the whole venue changes? I think it's totally relevant to look into it and find out how we can or not impact the future of that land.
Well, I guess my concern, I'm not aware of the statute that has changed or the removal, so my concern would be how that, from a legal perspective, how that has changed anything if it has.
I don't think it changed very much. They changed the name of it from in the statute, the substance of the statute stays the same, but the label has changed from a museum to a learning center, I believe. I'm just going off.
Literacy Learning Center, Agriculture Literacy Learning Center.
And if you're still fulfilling the purposes of the statute and you have artifacts of our agricultural past, for all intents and purposes, it's a museum by a different name.
Is it still the officially designated state museum?
It's still the Florida State Literacy Learning Center.
What is that?
Agriculture Legacy Learning Center.
Legacy Learning
Yeah, there we
Center.
go, yeah.
Legacy
Right, but it
Learning
was the
Center.
official state museum
Yes.
for agriculture.
Right.
Is it still that? Did the statute change that?
And I'm just going off memory, but I don't think it did.
Like, that
And
would
the
be the only thing I would.
Yeah, and the
ask.
We need
states,
to wait
and the
for
states
data,
involved,
because I think it did.
the state's still involved. We have a member of the Department of Agriculture, Secretary of Agriculture's staff on our board. And plus, everything we do has to be washed through the Secretary of Agriculture.
Well, I can certainly prepare a presentation or a
Maybe
memorandum.
That's all I'm asking for, is I just want to make sure that we're keeping up with the statute and that what does that change for us, if anything? What is our opinion on it?
Okay.
How do we make them not make them, how do we help them also be successful? Because things have changed, their directive, and was our parcel of land. I did see a memorandum from their attorney on their board. They asked their attorney very specifically who owned that property. Did we have a right to take it back? Their attorney said, no, we have no rights in it any longer. So that's interesting to me, that I want to make sure that we're
We'll look
keeping
into
abreast
that.
of this, because
Sure.
if that's the case, can they sell it? Can they sell it to? These are things, even if it's just we're keeping up on it,
Yeah.
not a take or anything like that per se.
Right.
I want to make sure we're keeping up on what was the intent.
We'll
Has
look
the
at-
intent changed? Does that change the parameters of our agreement with it? And if so, what are we supposed to be doing?
Okay, yeah, we'll look into that and report back. And just answer quickly your question. They can sell it. The condition would run with the land.
Right.
Wait a minute.
It's a deed restriction.
Our agriculture, I want to get this straight because this is the first I've heard of it, because I'm not involved in that unit. Okay? We've had the Agricultural Museum here 21 years since I've been here. Sometime over the summer, it was, Commissioner Pennington?
That was the latest update that we had gotten, and I'm going to try to see if I can
Sometime
pull
the
it up.
state took it over. Why did they take it over?
It was
No,
not
they didn't take it over.
They didn't take it over.
They didn't take it over. They just renamed it.
Yeah, they renamed it,
We didn't rename it. They renamed it.
right.
So
Yes.
that means they own it, right?
No.
It's still a state,
State owns it,
No,
correct?
no,
Why don't we,
Commissioner.
why don't we
That's why I'm
hold off
asking.
on-
Well, you brought this up, is this on
Right.
our, is this coming up
But
in
it's
our
in-
next meeting?
No.
I'm just asking for clarity on what changed there. You know what I mean? That's it. I don't want to push any, and I'm just asking if the board wants to
I'm
find
trying to
clarity on
understand
it.
what you're
Right,
even
and
talking
with
about.
I'm not-
two new members, it's probably not a bad time to revisit the,
The whole story of the
Right.
museum. I'm a little confused what our role is now,
I'm worried about the liability. You're going to have 10,000 people walk into that property, somebody's going to get hurt, who's responsible then? There's so much.
Well,
they have their own
festival?
insurance. They have
Yeah,
an
they have their own.
insurance policy, covers everything.
Hopefully.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, because they run horseback riding and stuff like that.
All right, Mr. Moylan, do you have enough from us for that
Yes.
directive? Okay.
Please help.
We'll report back.
I'm not trying to, I really just want to know what changed and what are we supposed to be doing?
Did anybody else want to add anything, have anything to? Mr. Hanson, did you want to float that again?
I move we adjourn.
Oh, yeah.
Meeting
I forgot.
adjourned.
I was like, what's he floating?
We do have to reconvene. You want to take a couple minute break? Are everybody ready? We can't go anywhere yet, guys. Okay. Yep, special meeting. Do you need a break? Everybody good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, we're good. We can reconvene, we'll convene now the special meeting, which, since the workshop has been adjourned, this is Flagler County Board of County Commissioners special meeting, and it is 4:15 p.m. on February 10th, 2025. If everybody could please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, it has been a long day. We are going to go right into the meat of the topic. We have everybody in attendance, so I will
What is the topic?
let Ms. Petito
That's all it says.
have the floor.
So this is really just kind of a high level because we're in the middle of negotiations for environmentally sensitive land purchase. Kind of high level, it is a little over 200 acres of property that we had described. It would be west of US 1. It would adjoin other publicly owned properties that currently the Ag Museum is ownership of, as well as the Water Management District. This is something that we would be using the $3 million legislative appropriation money to purchase. We've been in communication with FWC, which is the granting agency for the funding to Flagler County. The state has approved of this process. They're looking to have this land purchase sale agreement and closing done by the end of February. We have a draft purchase and sale agreement that came in kind of late on Friday, I believe it was. So we're not going to have another opportunity to have a meeting in front of the board. So with the understanding that we are just fine-tuning the document, at some point it's going to need to be considered and approved, signed by the chair of the Board of County Commission. So really, we were just wanting to put this out there to let you know that kind of looking for guidance, direction, approval of this with the understanding that the details of the agreement need to be ironed out. We hope to have it done this week, and then at some point the chair would be required to sign it. I don't know if I missed anything. No? Okay.
Yeah, so are you asking us to make a formal motion and
Just-
authorizing chairman to sign? Is that what you're?
Yes, I mean, it would be approved as to form and, definitely go through our legal office, and then we could share a copy with you. We just don't have the final document in hand today. So it's with the understanding that we're not exceeding $3 million, that we are using the FWC grant funds, which were part of that legislative appropriation. It is to purchase the property that was identified as one of the 5 in that legislative ask. And it's really just to provide approval for the chair to sign this purchase and sale agreement so that we can close by the end of the month. And I don't know if maybe legal has anything to add.
So my understanding is that the state of Florida, who gave us this money, is asking us to move it along. Otherwise, we would never come at you this way. It would be a part of a normal agenda, something you would review ahead of time. This came to us late on Friday. The agreement provides for a $150,000 deposit, total purchase price of $3 million. It's approximately 210 acres west of US 1 in the northern part of the county near Pellisier Creek. The agreement, I have read through the agreement. It has much of the standard language you would expect in a purchase and sale agreement. We have a short due diligence period to get a title commitment, to survey the land, to make objections if there's any clouds on the title we're not willing to live with, and then the seller can remove those, or we can get out of the agreement and get our money back, or the deposit back. So standard types of terms, standard documents that a title company would want us to sign at the closing. So I'm trying to just give you a high-level view of what the agreement is, like.
Can you go to the parcel? We didn't really zoom into the specific parcel during the prior, so that might help with a visual.
Don't like it at all. I understand that. I don't see it. I can't see it. I can't see it on the screen. I can't see it on the calendar. I don't see it up here. Talking about which parcel? He talked about 8 parcels.
Okay. You can't talk amongst your...
I'm just talking myself. Oh, hi, everybody. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the audience, huh? Okay.
We're going to try to bring up a copy of the exhibit to the purchase and sale agreement. We just need to move it over into the agenda drive, so bear with us.
The yellow line at the top of the image is Pellisier Creek. That is the northern boundary of Flagler County. And you can see US 1 going north and south on the right-hand side.
So it's not a continuous, it's the green section, or is it the blue section?
It's the 3 green sections.
Yeah.
It's not
So
all.
it's not continuous.
Right.
And the portion to the north of it is owned by St. John's Water Management in conservation, right? That's that piece
Correct.
that had all the historical significance.
And that upper blue in the far upper right, that's Ag Museum?
Across the road from it.
No, they
Oh,
own...
you mean the little
They own where the... That's,
gopher and the,
yeah, that's 66 acres
I think
of...
that's the sawmill, right?
Yeah, it's a sawmill.
Yeah, so if you look at the one that says the 33.7 acres, that parcel right below it is actually their gopher tortoise site.
Oh, cool.
And then the kind of round, sort of round or rectangular shape that's inset into that, that's actually where the Hewitt Sawmill is. Both of those are owned by the Ag Museum. And then as you look to the north, we're just bringing it up through the property appraiser so you can see that. So that's the Ag Museum property there. And then that other little kind of round sort of one to the right of that one there is that's the Hewitt Sawmill. The property to the north of the land that we're acquiring is through the Water Management District, and it's consistent along that whole edge there. So we would just be taking down more property, putting into public ownership, regardless of who owns it. It's just preserving it. It's an area that's referred to as Pringle Forest. Pringle Forest is a much larger kind of tract of land, but this is the portion that we're able to acquire utilizing that $3 million.
From US 1, do we have access to the property east of the railroad for maintenance?
I believe so.
Because you show the blue as being not ours, so is there some way along Ranch House grade to continue to access the area for maintenance?
We would have an easement
Okay.
over the existing roadway network that's there, with the understanding that at some point it'll probably get improved.
Okay, as long as, I think it's important we keep some type of access for maintenance on our side
Andy,
of the railroad.
Yeah, there's a road there.
Ranch House grade, right,
Yeah, it goes, because they use it to get to the sawmill.
right. And the other one we can access, I guess, is there maintenance required? Do we have to go in for prescribed burns or do anything in those areas?
I'm not sure of the immediate. It is obviously right now being managed by the property owner, which is in the timber business. So Eric's not here. I know he's got the meeting upstairs with the land acquisition group. I believe, kind of the path moving forward would be that we would work in conjunction with the Water Management District as
Right.
far as continuity. We talked about whether or not we would manage it, whether or not they would manage it, and kind of, trying to work with the adjacent landowners. At some point, you will have some responsibility, just like any other property that we own that's conservation related, whether it's prescribed burns, things of that nature, so.
I think because I see Commissioner Richardson looking, I think it's a little confusing, but this money is specifically allocated from the state for this area.
When I
right?
see it on the map, I can address it now,
Yeah. you
and I
can't
can
see it.
vision it
Yeah, just to
rather than just a blank check. I
Yeah.
don't sign blank checks.
I will say for transparency, it was the agenda was difficult because it didn't actually identify anything. It just says consideration of a sale agreement, and it had nothing attached, which was very difficult for the board and for the public. They must be wondering what was going on at our special meeting today.
We have through the end of the month, right? Their deadline is the end of the month.
We have to close by the end of the
Survey
month, and
close.
the only reason why we are bringing it forward today is for the board's consideration, because we do have some additional work. We have to get a survey.
Right.
We need to work with a title company that has already been allocated or identified to handle this, that met with the state's approval. So
So consensus to move forward, is there an opportunity to reconvene at a special meeting that gives everybody confidence that they are looking at the material that they are approving?
we'll have to look at the schedule to see when we could get that done.
Can we do that while we're here?
Sure, hold on, let me text.
And that we, just to make sure we have quorum, everybody can check their schedules and see if they... I think the appropriate action is to, we know the deadline, we know the urgency, it's still the 10th of the month, and we don't have another meeting scheduled, but we do I keep my Mondays open just for things that may pop up, and this is one thing that may pop up. I have no qualms with the property and the fact that, again, this was specifically stated in the allocation, so it's been part of the record and what we've been trying to achieve for a long time. We have a set of commissioners with different expertise, and I think their review of the documents prior to for final approval would be appropriate.
I will
There
say
is a
this. I will
case-
say this. When you, if you're looking at this, you're like, why are we buying all this? But when you really know the plan up in that corridor and Ranch House grade and the road that'll run alongside of it, at some point there will be I believe, there's a possibility of a legitimate road running into right on Ranch House grade. And then I know I've spoken with St. John's Water Management before about that parcel to the north, where there could potentially one day be a partnership to allow for almost another Princess Place type reserve along Pellisier in the future. A lot of that just makes good sense. So I'm comfortable, and I know the state allocated specifically these funds for it. So in theory, I have no issue at all for ESL funds. So,
And I would say if you pull up the overlay of the FEMA flood map, this falls under Adam's criteria of development impact, a high level. I mean, it's not wet other than the areas along the creeks. The areas between the creeks are not in the floodplain, and these projects are all falling within a signature that could be developed. So, and it's abutting the development.
I have to say, if you think I'm
Thank
still in a
was
no
fast.
mentality, I'm just able to now absorb what you were talking about on a blank scale. Now it's present, forward, and available to review.
backup for it.
It was no backup, and that's where my point was. I don't do things without knowing that it's to the best of the environment and the community, and just not signing checks. It's just, that's what I heard. So please understand that I'm conservative in that value.
And we,
I don't need to see a final document either. Purchase and sale agreement, you've got your contingencies, you've got your inspection or your survey contingency, right? You've got your due diligence to, you know what you're buying from looking at the map. State's given us the funding. When we went through this back in November, we talked about, I know I specifically talked to Adam about how we were going to spend this money. We came down to the 13th hour, and I understand the urgency, and I don't want to lose it. So I'm fine with making a motion to enter into a purchase and sale agreement up to $3 million with closing on or about February 28th.
Kim, I agree with that. I don't see a downside at all to giving Andy the authority to sign this because we're doing our due diligence on it. We all know where the land is, and I agree with Andy that this is a nice piece of land. We ought to take it off the market. So, Kim, was that a motion? Did you make a motion? I'll second that motion.
Does that mean it's coming back, or that is the authority?
No, that means you get to sign the document. We're giving you permission to
Okay.
sign the document.
Questions? Okay. With that, I'll open it up for public comment. Is anybody in the public? Seeing one, we'll hold off a sec.
Good morning, Richard, or good afternoon. Richard Hamilton of Island Estates. I know the answer to my question, but I want it for the record anyway, that this has been approved by the Environmentally Sensitive Land Committee for approval. I didn't hear anything in the discussions that mentioned that. And I think it's appropriate that you should recognize that, considering the work that they do.
Right. I think the clarity is this is a specific appropriation from the legislature outside of the ESL program. Although it's still on their list, if this, I guess if we didn't have this, it was but you can clarify, right?
We've been trying to take down this property for quite some time, and I know that it seems like it is the final hour, and it's only because of the time constraint by the state that if we don't spend it and close by the end of the month, then we would lose it. But we've been working for 2 years with multiple property owners that have projects that are on the Land Acquisition Committee ranking, and they're just in various stages, and some of the property owners aren't willing to sell at this time. So this particular property had been identified, as the chair mentioned, as one of the 5 through that legislative ask. They are aware, I believe, of the unique historic qualifications or characteristics of the property. It's part of the original Old Kings Road. It is in an area that is highly desired to acquire for environmental reasons, for conservation. So it is something that they are familiar with. I don't know that the purchase and sale agreement was provided to them only because we got it late on Friday. This is kind of outside of our normal realm of doing business, but it's really just because of the timing and sensitivity to make sure that we close by the end of the month.
As I said, I knew the answer. I just wanted to get it on the record that they do a lot of work and very much for you, and they should be recognized for that too. Thank you.
All right, I have a motion to second. We still have questions. So what's the timeline that you see happening to get this done by the 28th? So is the agreement...
We need title work and a survey. I am not involved, and I don't know what stage we're at with obtaining that stuff.
We have a title company that we were able to use on, I believe it was maybe another project. They're outside of our immediate community, but their responsiveness to getting the survey work done is much quicker than maybe what we've experienced locally. So we just need to work with the title company. The title company had already been identified through the process. They know the turnaround time that we need, so we're confident that it'll happen by the end of the month. It's just getting this initial approval, and once we finalize the terms and conditions of the agreement, which hopefully we have to them in the next day or two.
So the, again, just pardon my questioning, we can authorize you to proceed with all the things that you need to do, but still bring the final agreement back to us for review? Is there time for that?
Back to you.
I know it's not the motion, I'm just asking questions. No, to the board, not just to me. I understand you guys are giving me the authority to sign it in the motion.
We have the 24th available to us, but that's the week that we would have to close. Next Monday is a holiday, so we're not going to be here. It would be that following Monday that we had looked at, but I think that you're kind of cutting it close. We could try to get something scheduled next week. It might not be on a Monday.
Well, if you want to do that, then the motion is moot.
No, I'm just, right, well, I mean, there still could be a majority of people that agree to do that. It doesn't, we don't have to have unanimous to move forward. I'm just saying I'm trying to, there's been a lot of good points raised as to the appropriateness of the public disclosure and record and what we put out to the public. I'm trying to close the gap on that so that we are following the proper transparency protocols to the public and on an important piece of policy legislation here, getting this thing done and preserving it it's important. I don't want it to be buried in negativity. I want it to be looking for a way out. If there's other times other than Monday, the holiday, that we can convene, I'm trying to see when we could bring. Again, don't have to have everything in place, but in my mind, I would rather it be posted and advertised with the intent of what it is we have and what we're doing.
Yeah, I think I understand that, but because that's was my concern when I saw that. No backup, no name on it. You know, is that a proper posting? And we really are trying to push for transparency. So is it just possible we all know we're in agreement and they can move forward with survey and title, but for full transparency, can we post it and come back in here like at 4 o'clock and knock it out in 30 minutes?
Well, emergency requires 24 hours, right?
But
Well, I meant like, whatever day they pick. We don't have to come middle of the day and ruin the day, but
I
come
don't
early
think
in
you're
the
going to
morning.
find a title company that will take any expenses on a piece of property unless you have a bilateral contract. Right? You can't, they're waiting for the contract. A title company, you can't move forward with anything without. They might? Okay.
President's Day. President's Day.
Do they take the day off?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't at the bank.
Columbus was a terrorist.
We could do the 18th if you're looking at next week. I'm just waiting on a time to see what's available.
Thursday, Friday, not this week?
I won't be here, but that doesn't stop you guys from meeting.
It's true. Fill in, Jorge?
What, Friday of this week? Yeah, I get it. Yeah. I was willing to let Andy do the whole thing.
That would be the only thing, is to check our canvassing
Never
board
review the whole
schedule.
thing.
That's
What
at
time?
10.
On what day?
Yeah.
Thursday.
Okay. I'm for open Friday. I know Fridays are open, but no, this is less, 30 minutes at the most. 9 Thursday? What's everybody looking at 9 Thursday? You're not? Okay. No. Okay, 9 Thursday?
I'm waiting for somebody to text me back. They're
Okay.
looking.
Yeah, I can do it. Thursday morning?
Okay.
You withdraw the motion.
Today's,
Or they
yeah, we
withdraw.
will need to withdraw if we're going to,
I'll withdraw my motion.
okay. You're good with withdrawing your second, Commissioner Hanson?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
We're just verifying. It doesn't make for great TV, but we're...
What time did you propose? We're looking at the 13th at 1. Could you do 1 o'clock, or did you prefer to do it in the morning before?
About 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock.
I didn't know if they were listening to the meeting or not, so.
Yeah, man, it's in there.
All right, she just sent a reminder that you have canvassing at 10, so at 9 o'clock, we should be rather
Yes,
quick and just get
quick
out of here.
meeting.
Okay. Thursday at 9, the 13th.
Okay. We have consensus on that, so we'll move forward. Thank you for the quick follow-up. Sorry, Kim. But thank you for trying to push it through. Appreciate that. I'll open up for public comment. Is there anybody for today's special meeting that wanted to address us for public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the dais. I believe all of our work has been achieved.
Move we adjourn.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.